Harry and Ron looked quickly around too. It sounded as though someone was staggering toward their clearing. They waited, listening to the sounds of the uneven steps behind the dark trees.
It was Morris, clutching his knees to his chest and huddled as deep into the furthest corner as he could get.
"He tricked us," Matt panted. "It was some kind of trick."
Mordred threw back his head and wailed. Dust sifted down as the walls trembled. "You are all dead!" he cried. "All dead!" And he leaped up, diving across the room. Brand's jaw dropped, and he almost dropped the sword as well. As Mordred dove through the air, he stretched out and thinned, like a tendril of smoke. As thin as a finger, he struck a crack in the wall tiles and vanished into it. A last cry hung in the room as he vanished, fading slowly away after he was gone. "You are all dead." "Let's get out of here," Perrin said faintly, firming his grip on his axe while he tried to face every direction at once. Gold ornaments and gems scattered unnoticed under his feet.
"But the treasure," Matt protested. "We can't just leave it now."
"I don't want anything of his," Perrin said, still turning one way after another. He raised his voice and shouted at the walls. "It's your treasure, you hear? We're not taking any of it." Brand stared angrily at Matt. "You want him coming after us? Or are you going to wait here, stuffing your pockets until he comes back with 10 more like him?" Matt just gestured to all the gold and jewels. Before he could say anything, though, Rand seized one of his arms, and Perrin grabbed the other. They hustled him out of the room, Matt struggling and shouting about the treasure. Before they had gone 10 steps down the hall, the already dim light behind them began to fail. The torches in the treasure room were going out. Matt stopped shouting. They hastened their steps. The first torch outside the room winked out, then the next. By the time they reached the winding stairs, there was no need to drag Matt any longer. They were all running, with the dark closing in behind them. Even the pitch black of the stairs only made them hesitate an instant. Then they sped upwards, shouting at the top of their lungs. Shouting to scare anything that might be waiting. Shouting to remind themselves they were still alive. They burst out into the hall above, sliding and falling on the dusty marble, scrambling out through the columns, to tumble down the stairs and land in a bruised heap in the street. Brand untangled himself and picked Tam's sword up from the pavement, looking around uneasily. Less than half of the sun still showed above the rooftops. Shadows reached out like dark hands, made blacker by the remaining light, nearly filling the street. He shivered. The shadows looked like Mordeth, reaching.
"At least we're out of it."
Matt got up from the bottom of the pile, dusting himself off in a shaky imitation of his usual manner.
"And at least
Are we?" Perrin said. Rand knew it was not his imagination this time. The back of his neck prickled. Something was watching them from the darkness in the columns. He spun around, staring at the buildings across the way. He could feel eyes on him from there, too. His grip tightened on his sword hilt, though he wondered what good it would be. Watching eyes seemed to be everywhere. The others looked around warily. He knew they could feel it, too. "We stay in the middle of the street," he said hoarsely. They met his eyes. They looked as frightened as he felt. He swallowed hard. "We stay in the middle of the street, keep out of shadows as much as we can, and walk fast." "Walk very fast," Matt agreed fervently. The watchers followed them. Or else there were lots of watchers, lots of eyes staring out of almost every building. Rand could not see anything move, hard as he tried, but he could feel the eyes, eager, hungry. He did not know which would be worse, thousands of eyes or just a few following them. In the stretches where the sun still reached them, they slowed, just a little, squinting nervously into the darkness that always seemed to lay ahead. None of them was eager to enter the shadows. No one was really sure something might not be waiting. The watcher's anticipation was a palpable thing whenever shadows stretched across the street, barring their way. They ran through those dark places, shouting. Rand thought he could hear dry, rustling laughter. At last, with twilight falling, they came inside of the white stone building they had left what seemed like days ago. Suddenly, the watching eyes departed. Between one step and the next, they vanished in a blink. Without a word, Rand broke into a trot, followed by his friends. Then a full run that only ended when they aired through the doorway and collapsed, panting. A small fire burned in the middle of the tile floor, the smoke vanishing through a hole in the ceiling in a way that reminded Rand unpleasantly of Mordor. Everyone except Lan was there, gathered around the flames, and their reactions varied considerably.
This one was called
fire gave a start as the
Chicken
three
and
burst into the room,
Waffles.
clutching her hands to shrugged. When she saw who it was,
This
a
one
renewed
was,
sigh spoiled her attempt at a withering look.
$30 for a
Tom
half
nearly
ounce
muttered
of a
something about his
shake.
pipe stem, but Rand caught the word.
Then I got
"Ooh,"
some
before the gleeman went back to poking the
gelato
flames with his
sundae.
stick. You wool-headed witlings! The wisdom snapped. She bristled from head to foot. Her eyes glittered and bright spots of red burned on her cheeks.
I got an ounce of
Why
that.
did you run off like that?
And
Are
an
you
ounce
all
of
Have you no sense of all?
this
Man is out looking for you now. And you'll be
was
luckier than you deserve if he does not pound some
almost
sense
as
into a
much
lot
as
of
what
you
I
when he
paid
gets
for a
back.
half ounce of this,
The
but
eyes face betrayed no
the difference
agitation
between
at all.
these two
Her
is
hands had loosed
this
a white
one
knuckled grip
is their
on the dress
outdoor,
inside of them. Whatever
and
Nynaeve
this
had
one is
given
their
her must have
indoor.
helped. She was on her feet. You should not have done what you did, she
See if I
said in
can
a
fix
voice
this
as
lens
clear
real
and
quick.
serene as a waterwood pond. We will speak of it later. Something happened out there. We would not be falling all over one another like this. Tell me. You said it was safe, Matt complained, scrambling to his feet. You said Ardhall was an ally of Manetheren, and Trollocs wouldn't come into the city, and... Lorraine stepped forward so suddenly that Matt cut off with his mouth
But I
open.
figured since I had it, had the extra at the time,
Trollocs.
that
Did you see
because we all
Trollocs inside the
they're
walls?
outdoor that we get that's
Not Trollocs, he said.
the
And all three
$1 a
began
gram
talking
that we
inside the
pay
cave, all at the same time.
$28 plus tax on.
Everyone began in a different place. Matt started with finding the
That
treasure,
one's
sounding
always
almost as if
usually
he
the
had done it
same
alone,
kind,
while
and
Perrin
it's
began
always their
explaining why they had gone
outdoor.
off in the first place without telling anyone.
But
Rand jumped right to what he thought was important, meeting the
the
stranger
other
among
stuff
the
I bought, the
colonists.
half
But
ounce,
they were
that's all
also
their
excited that
indoor.
nobody told anything
I
of the
usually
order of
don't. We usually don't
Whenever
get
one of them
their
thought of something,
other
he
stuff
blurted it out with
unless
no
we
regard
buy
for
it
what
by
came
the
before
8th.
or after,
But
or for who was saying
once
what.
in a while we'll get the shake just because
They all babbled about the watchers.
it's usually
It
the
made the whole
cheaper
tale
way
close
that
to
we could
incoherent.
get some of the
But their fear came
other
true.
stuff that's pretty good.
Egwene began
But it's a
casting uneasy
shake.
glances
It's
at the empty windows
$30 for a half an
Out
ounce.
there, the last remnants
What
of
is up with
twilight
my
were
camera?
fading. The fire seemed very
See.
small and dim. Tom took his pipe from between his
There we
teeth
go.
and listened with his head cocked, frowning. Lorraine's eyes showed concern, but not an undue
But
amount.
I'll pay the same amount for the
Suddenly
half
the Aes Sedai
ounce
hissed and grabbed
just
Rand's
because it's
elbow in a
something
tight grip.
different, something good.
Mordit, are you sure of that name? Be very sure, all of you. Mordit?
It's cleared up.
They
Yeah,
murmured a chorus
nice.
yes, taken aback by the Aes Sedai's intensity. Did he touch you? She asked them all. Did he give you anything? Or did you do anything for him? I must know. No, Rand said. None of us. None of those things. Perrin nodded agreement and added, all he did was try to kill us. Isn't that enough? He swelled up until he filled half the room, shouted that we were all dead men, then vanished. He moved his hand to demonstrate. Like smoke. Egwene gave a squeak. Matt twisted away petulantly. Safe, you say? All that talk about Trollocs not coming here. What were we supposed to think? Apparently you did not think at all, she said, coolly composed once more. Anyone who thinks would be wary of a place that Trollocs are afraid to enter. Matt's doing, Nynaeve said, certainty in her voice. He's always talking some mischief or other, and the others lose the little wits they were born with when they're around him. Lorraine nodded briefly, but her eyes remained on Rand and his two friends. Late in the Trolloc Wars, an army camped within these ruins. Trollocs, Dark Friends, Murdral, Dreadlords, thousands in all. When they did not come out, scouts were sent inside the walls. The scouts found weapons, bits of armor, and blood splattered everywhere. And messages scratched on walls in the Trolloc tongue, calling on the Dark One to aid them in their last hour. And who came later found no trace of the blood or the messages. They had been scoured away. Halfmen and Trollocs remember still. That is what keeps them outside this place. And this is where you picked for us to hide? Rand said in disbelief. We'd be safer out there trying to outrun them. If you had not gone running off, Moraine said patiently, you would know that I set wards around this building. A Myrddraal would not even know these wards were there. For it is a different kind of evil they are meant to stop. But what resides in Shada Logoth will not cross them, or even come to
Oh,
me.
damn, that sucks, Fire.
In the morning
Definitely
we'll be
glad
safe
you're
enough to
okay.
go. These
That's
things
crazy.
cannot stand the light of the sun.
That's close.
They will be hiding deep in the earth. Shada Logoth, Egwene said uncertainly. I thought you said the city was called Aridhall. Once it was called Aridhall, Moraine replied, and was one of the 10 nations, the lands that made the Second Covenant, the lands that stood against the Dark One from the first days after the breaking of the world. In the days when Thorin al-Torin al-Ban was king of Manetheren, the king of Aridhall was Balwin Mael, Balwin Ironhand. In a twilight of despair during the Colic Wars, when it seemed the father of lies must surely conquer, the man called Morith came to Balwin's court. The same man? Rand exclaimed, and Matt said, it couldn't be. A glance from Moraine silenced them.
Don't have any dabs
Stillness
tonight,
filled
but
the room except
well,
for the Aes
technically I
Sedai's
do.
voice.
I
Before
got
Morith had been long in the city, he
my
had Balwin's
pins.
ear, and soon he was second only to the king. Morith whispered poison in Balwin's ear. Aridhall began to change. Aridhall drew in on itself, hardened. It was said that some would rather see Trollocs come than the men of Aridhall. The victory of the light is all. That was the battle cry Mordeth gave them, and the men of Aridhall
one
shouted it
rolled up.
while their deeds abandoned the
Just
light.
gotta roll another one.
The story is too long to tell in full and too
Roll
grim.
some
Only
gelato.
fragments are known, even in Tar Valon. How Thorin's son Kar came to win Aridhall back to the Second Covenant. And Balwin sat his throne a withered shell with the light of madness in his eyes, laughing while Mordeth smiled at his side and ordered the deaths of Kar and the embassy as friends of the dark. How Prince Kar came to be called Kar One Hand. How he escaped the dungeons of Aridhall and fled alone to the borderlands, with Mordeth's unnatural assassins at his heels. How there he met Rhea, who did not know who he was, and married her, and set the skein and the pattern that led to his death at her hands, and hers by her own hand before his tomb, and the fall of Aleth L'Oreal. How the armies of Manetheren came to avenge Kar and found the gates of Ardhall torn down. No living thing inside the walls, but something worse than death. No enemy had come to Ardhall, but Aridhall. Suspicion and hate had given birth to something that fed on that which created it, something locked in the bedrock on which the city stood. Mashada waits still, hungering. Men spoke of Aridhall no more. They named it Shada Logoth, the place where the shadow waits, or more simply, shadows waiting. Mordeth alone was not consumed by Mashadar, but he was snared by it, and he too has waited within these walls through the long centuries. Others have seen him. Some he has influenced through gifts that twist the mind and taint the spirit, the taint waxing and waning until it rules or kills. If ever he convinces someone to accompany him to the walls, to the boundary of Mashadar's power, he will be able to consume the soul of that person. Mordeth will leave, wearing the body of the one he worse than killed, to wreak his evil on the world again. The treasure, Perrin mumbled when she stopped. He wanted us to help carry the treasure to his horses. His face was haggard. I'll bet they were supposed to be outside the city somewhere. Rand shivered. But we are safe now, aren't we? Matt asked. He didn't give us anything, and he didn't touch us. We're safe, aren't we? With the wards you set? We are safe, Maureen agreed. He cannot cross the ward lines, nor can any other denizen of this place. And they must hide from the sunlight so we can leave safely once it is day. Now, try to sleep. The wards will protect us until Lan returns.
I got my pin,
He has been
so
gone a long time.
I guess that
He
helps.
looked wordly at the night outside. Full dark had fallen, as black as pitch. Lan will be well, Maureen said soothingly, and spread her blankets beside the fire while she spoke. He was pledged to fight the Dark One before he left the cradle, a sword placed in his infant hands. Besides, I would know the minute of his death and the way of it, just as he would know mine. Rest, Nynaeve. All will be well. But as she was rolling herself into her blankets, she paused, staring at the street as if she too would have liked to know what kept the water. Rand's arms and legs felt like lead, and his eyes wanted to slide shut on their own, yet sleep did not come quickly, and once it did, he dreamed, muttering and kicking off his blankets. When he woke, it was suddenly, and he looked around for a moment before he remembered where he was. The moon was up, the last thin sliver before the new moon, its faint light defeated by the night. Everyone else was still asleep, though not all soundly. Egwene and his two friends twisted and murmured inaudibly. Tom's snores, soft for once, were broken from time to time by half-formed words. There was still no sign of land. Suddenly he felt as if the wards were no protection at all. Anything at all could be out there in the dark. Telling himself he was being foolish, he added wood to the last coals of the fire. The blaze was too small to give much warmth, but it gave more light. He had no idea what had awakened him from his unpleasant dream. He had been a little boy again, carrying Tam's sword, and with a cradle strapped to his back, running through empty streets, pursued by Mordeth, who shouted that he only wanted his hand. And there had been an old man who watched them and cackled with mad laughter the whole time. He gathered his blankets and lay back, staring at the ceiling. He wanted very much to sleep, even if he had more dreams like the last one. But he could not make his eyes close. Suddenly the warder trotted silently out of the darkness into the room. Moraine came awake and sat up as if he had rung a bell. Lan opened his hand. 3 small objects fell to the tiles in front of her with a clink of iron. 3 blood-red badges in the shape of horned skulls. There are Trollocs inside the walls, Lan said. They will be here in little more than an hour. And the double are the worst of them. He began waking the others. Moraine smoothly began folding her blankets. How many? Do they know we are here? She sounded as if there were no urgency at all. I don't think they do, Lan replied. They are well over 100, frightened enough to kill anything that moves, including one another. The half-men are having to drive them, 4 just to handle one fist. And even the Murdral seem to want nothing more than to pass through the city and out as quickly as possible. They are not going out of their way to search, and they're so slipshod that if they were not heading nearly straight for us, I would say we had nothing to worry about.
Well,
he hesitated. There is something else? Only this, Lan said slowly. The Murdral forced the Trollocs into the city. What forced the Murdral? Everyone had been listening in silence. Now Tom cursed under his breath, and Egwene breathed a question. The Dark One? Don't be a fool, girl, Nynaeve snapped. The Dark One is bound in Shale Cool by the Creator. For the time being, at least, Moraine agreed. No, the Father of Lies is not out there. But we must leave in any case. Nynaeve eyed her narrowly. Leave the protection of the wards and cross Shadar Logoth in the night? Or stay here and face the Trollocs, Moraine said. To hold them off here would require the one power. It would destroy the wards and attract the very thing the wards are meant to protect against. Besides, as well build a signal fire atop one of those towers for every half-man within 20 miles. To leave is not what I would choose to do, but we are the hare, and it is the hounds who dictate the chase. What if there are more outside the walls? Lan asked. What are we going to do? We will use my original plan, Moraine said. Lan looked at her. She held up a hand and added, which I was too tired to carry out before, but I am rested now, thanks to the wisdom. We will make for the river. There, with our backs guarded by the water, I can raise a smaller ward that will hold the Trollocs and half-men back until we can make rafts and cross over. Or better yet, we may even be able to hail a trader's boat coming down from Saldaia. The faces of the Emmons fielders looked blank. Lan noticed. Trollocs and Murdral loathe deep water. Trollocs are terrified of it. Neither can swim. A half-man will not wade anything more than waist deep, especially if it's moving. Trollocs won't do even that if they can find any way to avoid it. So, once we get across the river, we're safe, Rand said. The warder nodded. The Murdral will find it almost as hard to make the Trollocs build rafts as it was to drive them into Shadar Logoth. And if they try to make them cross the Arenal that way, half will run away, and the rest probably drown. Get to your horses, Moraine said. We're not across the river yet. Chapter 20. Dust on the Wind. As they left the white stone building on their nervously shifting horses, the icy wind came in gusts, moaning across the rooftops, whipping cloaks like banners, driving thin clouds across the thin sliver of the moon. With a quiet command to stay close, Lan led off down the street. The horses danced and tugged at the reins, eager to be away. Rand looked up warily at the buildings they passed, looming now in the night with their empty windows like eye sockets. Shadows seemed to move. Occasionally there was a clatter, rubble toppled by the wind. At least the eyes are gone. His relief was momentary. Why have they gone? Tom and the Emmons Fielders made a cluster with him, all keeping close enough to touch one another. Egwene's shoulders were hunched as if she were trying to ease Bella's hooves to the pavement. Rand did not even want to breathe. Sound might attract attention.
Let's do a couple.
Abruptly, he realized that a distance had opened ahead of them, separating them from the water and the Aes Sedai. The two were indistinct shapes, a good 30 paces ahead. We're falling behind, he murmured, and booted Cloud to a quicker step. A thin tendril of silver-gray fog drifted low across the street ahead of him. Stop! It was a strangled shot from Moraine, sharp and urgent, but pitched not to carry far. Uncertain, he pulled up short. The splinter of fog lay completely across the street now, slowly fattening as it oozing out of the buildings on either side of the street. It was as thick as a man's arm now. Cloud whickered and tried to back further away as Egwene and Tom and the others came upon him. Their horses, too, tossed their heads and bridled against coming too near the fog. Lan and Moraine rode slowly toward the fog, as big around as a leg, on the other side, well back. The Aes Sedai studied the branch of mist that separated them. Rand shrugged at a sudden itch of fear between his shoulder blades. A faint light accompanied the fog, growing as the foggy tentacle became fatter, but still only a little more than the moonlight. The horses shifted uneasily, even Aldib and Mondarb. What is it? Nynaeve asked. The evil of Shadar Logoth, Moraine replied. Mashadar. Unseen, unthinking, moving through the city as aimlessly as a worm burrows through the earth. If it touches you, you will die. Rand and the others let their horses dance a few quick steps back, but not too far. As much as Rand would have given to be free of the Aes Sedai, she was as safe as home compared to what lay around them. Then how do we join you? Egwene said. Can you kill it?
That will hurt a little bit.
Moraine's laughter was bitter and short. Mashadar is vast, girl. As vast as Shadar Logoth itself. The whole White Tower could not kill it. If I damaged it enough to let you pass, drawing that much the one power would pull the halfmen like a trumpet call. And Mashadar would rush in to heal whatever harm I did. Rush in and perhaps catch us in its net. Rand exchanged looks with Egwene, then asked her question again. Moraine sighed before answering. I do not like it, but what must be done must be done. This thing will not be above ground everywhere. Other streets will be clear. See that star? She twisted in her saddle to point to a red star low in the eastern sky. Keep on toward that star. It will bring you to the river. Whatever happens, keep moving toward the river. Go as quickly as you can. But above all, make no noise. There are still the Trollocs, remember? And 4 half-men. But how will we find you again? Egwene protested. I will find you, Moraine said. Be assured I can find you. I'll be off. This thing is utterly mindless, but it can sense food. Indeed, ropes of silver gray had lifted from the larger body. They drifted, wavering, like the tentacles of 100 arms in the bottom of a waterwood pond. When Rand looked up from the thick trunk of opaque mist, the water and the Aes Sedai were gone. He licked his lips and met his companion's eyes. They were as nervous as he was, and something worse. They all seemed to be waiting for someone else to move first. Night and ruins surrounded them. The Fades were out there somewhere, and the Trollocs, maybe around the next corner. The tentacles of fog drifted nearer, halfway to them now, and no longer wavering. They had chosen their intended prey. Suddenly, he missed Moraine very much. Everyone was still staring, wondering which way to go. He turned Cloud, and the gray broke into a half-trot, tugging against the reins to go faster. As if moving first had made him the leader, everyone followed. With Moraine gone, there was no one to protect them should Mordeth appear, and the Trollocs, and Rand forced himself to stop thinking. He would follow the Red Star. He could hold on to that thought. 3 times they had to backtrack from the street blocked from side to side by a hill of stone and brick the horses could never have crossed. Rand could hear the others breathing short and sharp, just shy of panic. He gritted his teeth to stop his own panting. You have to at least make them think you're not afraid. You're doing a good job, Woolhead. You'll get everybody out safely. They rounded the next corner. A wall of fog bathed the broken pavement with a light as bright as a full moon. Streamers as thick as their horses broke off toward them. Nobody waited. Wheeling, they galloped away in a tight knot with no heed for the clatter of hooves they raised. 2 Trollocs stepped into the street before them, not 10 spans away. For an instant, the humans and the Trollocs just stared at one another, each more surprised than the other. Another pair of Trollocs appeared, and another, colliding with the ones in front, folding into a shocked mass at the sight of the humans. Only for an instant did they remain frozen, though. Guttural howls echoed from the buildings, and the Trollocs bounded forward. The humans scattered like quail. Rand's gray reached full gallop in 3 strides. "This way!" he shouted, but he heard the same cry from 5 throats. A hasty glance over his shoulder showed him his companions disappearing in as many directions, Trollocs pursuing them all. 3 Trollocs ran at his own heels, catchpoles waving in the air. His skin crawled as he realized they were matching Cloud stride for stride. He dropped low on Cloud's neck and urged the gray on, chased by thick cries. The street narrowed ahead, broken-topped buildings leaning out drunkenly. Slowly the empty windows filled with a silvery glow, a dense mist bulging outward. Mushadar. Rand risked a glance over his shoulder. The Trollocs still ran less than 50 paces back. The light from the fog was enough to see them clearly. A Fade rode behind them now, and they seemed to flee the half-man as much as to pursue Rand. Ahead of Rand, half a dozen gray tendrils wavered from the windows, a dozen feeling the air. Cloud tossed his head and screamed, but Rand dug his heels in brutally and the horse lunged forward wildly. The tendrils stiffened as Rand galloped between them, but he crouched low on Cloud's neck and refused to look at them. The way beyond was clear. One of them touches me. Light. He booted Cloud harder, and the horse leaped forward into the welcome shadows. With Cloud still running, he looked back as soon as the glow of Mushadar began to lessen. The waving gray tentacles of Mushadar blocked half the street, and the Trollocs were balking, but the Fade snatched a whip from its saddle bow, cracking it over the heads of the Trollocs with a sound like a lightning bolt, popping sparks in the air. Crouching, the Trollocs lurched after Rand. The half-man hesitated, black cowl studying Mushadar's reaching arms, before it too spurred forward. The thickening tentacles of fog swung uncertainly for a moment, then struck like vipers. At least 2 attached to each Trolloc, bathing them in gray light. Muzzled heads went back to scream, but fog rolled over open mouths and in, eating the howls. 4 leg-thick tentacles whipped around the Fade, and the half-man and its black horse twitched as if dancing, till the cowl fell back, bearing that pale, eyeless face. The Fade shrieked. There was no sound from that cry, any more than from the Trollocs, but something came through, a piercing whine just beyond hearing, like all the hornets in the world digging into Rand's ears with all the fear that could exist. Cloud convulsed as if he too heard, and ran harder than ever. Rand hung on, panting, his throat as dry as sand. After a time, he realized he could no longer hear the silent shriek of the Fade dying, and suddenly the clatter of his gallop seemed as loud as shouts. He reined Cloud hard, stopping beside a jagged wall, right where two streets met. A nameless monument reared in the darkness before him. Slumped in the saddle, he listened, but there was nothing to hear except the blood pounding in his ears. Cold sweat beaded on his face, and he shivered as the wind flailed his coat. Finally, he straightened. Stars spangled the sky where the clouds did not hide them, but the red star low in the east was easy to mark. Is anybody else alive to see it? Were they free or in the Trollocs' hands? Wayne, light blind me, why didn't you follow me? If they were alive and free, they would be following that star. If not, the ruins were vast. He could search for days without finding anyone, if he could keep away from the Trollocs. And the Fades and Mordeth and Mashadar. Reluctantly, he decided to make for the river. He gathered the reins. On the crossing street, one stone fell against another with a sharp click. He froze, not even breathing. He was hidden in the shadows.
Let's try the other one.
Corner.
First one
He thought
was
of backing up. What was behind him? What would make a noise and give
Wedding
him away?
Cake, and this one's
He did
Northern
not
Lights.
remember, and he was afraid to take his eyes from the corner of the building. Darkness bulked at that corner, with the longer darkness of a shaft sticking out of it. Catchpole? Even as the thought flashed into Rand's mind, he dug his heels into Cloud's ribs, and his sword flew from the scabbard. A wordless shout accompanied his charge, and he swung the sword with all of his might. Only a desperate effort stopped the blade short. With a yelp, Matt tumbled back, half falling off his horse and nearly dropping his bow. Rand drew a deep breath and lowered his sword. His arm shook. Have you seen anybody else? He asked. Matt swallowed hard before pulling himself awkwardly back into his saddle. I, just the Trollocs. He put a hand to his throat and licked his lips. Just Trollocs. You? Rand shook his head. They must be trying to reach the river. We had better do the same. Matt nodded silently, still feeling his throat, and they started toward the Red Star. Before they had covered 100 spans, the keening cry of a Trolloc horn rose behind them in the depths of the city. Another answered from outside the walls. Rand shivered, but he kept to his slow pace, watching the darkest places and avoiding them when he could. After one jerk at his reins, as if he might gallop off, Matt did the same. Neither horn sounded again, and it was in silence that they came to an opening in the vine-shrouded wall where a gate had once been. Only the towers remained, standing broken-topped against the black sky. Matt hesitated at the gateway, but Rand said softly, "Is it any safer in here than out there?" He did not slow the gray, and after a moment, Matt followed him out of Shadar Logoth, trying to look every way at once. Rand let out a slow breath. His mouth was dry. We're going to make it. Light, we're going to make it. The walls vanished behind, swallowed by the night and the forest. Listening for the slightest sound, Rand kept the Red Star dead ahead. Suddenly, Tom galloped by from behind, slowing only long enough to shout, "Ride, you fools!" A moment later, hunting cries and crashes in the brush behind him announced the presence of Trollocs on his trail. Rand dug in his heels, and Cloud sprang after the gleeman's gelding. What happens when we get to the river without Moraine? Light, Egwene. Aaron sat his horse in the shadows, watching the open gateway, some little distance off yet, and absently ran his thumb along the blade of his axe. It seemed to be a clear way out of the ruined city, but he had sat there for 5 minutes studying it. The wind tossed his shaggy curls and tried to carry his cloak away, but he pulled the cloak back around him without really noticing what he was doing. He knew that Matt and almost everyone else in Emmons Field considered him slow of thought. It was partly because he was big and usually moved carefully.
This
He had
one's
always been afraid he might accidentally
key
break
lime
something or hurt
pie.
somebody, since he was so much bigger than he grew up with. But he really did prefer to think things all the way through if he could. Quick thinking, careless thinking, had put Matt into hot water one time after another. and Matt's quick thinking usually managed to get Rand or him, or both, in the cook pot alongside Matt, too. His throat tightened. Light. Don't think about being in a cook pot. He tried to order his thoughts again. Careful thought was the way. There had been some sort of square in front of the gate, a huge fountain in its middle. Part of the fountain was filled with a cluster of broken statues standing in a big round basin, and so was the open space around it. To reach the gate, he would have to ride nearly 100 spans with only the night to shield him from searching eyes. That was not a pleasant thought either. He remembered those unseen watchers too well. He considered the horns he had heard in the city a little while earlier. He had almost turned back, thinking some of the others might have been taken, before realizing that he could not do anything alone if they had been taken. Not again. What did Rand say? Alex and 4 fades. Moraine Sedai said get to the river. He went back to consideration.
Oh, that would hurt a little bit.
Careful thought had not given him much, but he had made his decision. He rode out of the deeper shadow into the lesser darkness.
He gave me a...
As he did, another horse appeared from the far side of the square and stopped. He stopped too and felt for his axe. It gave him no great sense of comfort. If that dark shape was a fade... Rand? Came a soft, hesitant call. He let out a long, relieved breath. It's Perrin, Egwene, he called back, just as softly. It still sounded too loud in the darkness. They came together near the fountain. Have you seen anybody else? They both asked at the same time, and both answered by shaking their heads.
Hey, Brian.
All right, Egwene muttered.
I don't have that set up on mine.
Moraine Sedai and Lan will look after them, Perrin replied. They will look after all of us once we get
I need to have my
so.
brother, most hated grower, show me how to do that.
Beyond the gate, even if there were Trollocs in the forest, or fades. He stopped that line of thought. The bare branches were not enough to keep him from guiding.
Give it a sec before
they were beyond
we start round 2.
That one had frightened him worse than the Trollocs ever had. Soon they would reach the river and meet Moraine, and she would put them beyond the Trollocs' reach as well. He believed it because he needed to believe. The wind scraped branches together and rustled the leaves and needles on the evergreens. A nighthawk's lonely cry drifted in the dark, and he and Egwene moved their horses closer together as though they were huddling for warmth. They were very much alone. A Trolloc horn sounded somewhere behind them, quick, wailing blasts urging the hunters to hurry, hurry. Then thick, half-human howls rose on their tail, spurred on by the horn. Howls that grew sharper as they caught the human scent. Perrin put his horse to a gallop, shouting, "Come on!" Egwene came, both of them booting their horses, heedless of noise, heedless of the branches that slapped at them. As they raced through the trees, guided as much by instinct as by the dim moonlight, Bella fell behind. Perrin looked back. Egwene kicked the mare and flailed her with the reins, but it was doing no good. By their sounds, the Trollocs were coming closer. He drew in enough not to leave her behind. "Hurry!" he shouted. He could make out the Trollocs now, huge dark shapes bounding through the trees, bellowing and snarling to chill the blood. He gripped the haft of his axe, hanging at his belt, until his knuckles hurt. "Hurry, Egwene! Hurry!" Suddenly his horse screamed and he was falling, tumbling out of the saddle as the horse dropped away beneath him. He flung out his hands to brace himself and splashed headfirst into icy water. He had ridden
How's your night going,
the Aranel.
Ryan?
The shock of freezing water ripped a gasp from him, and he swallowed more than a little before he managed to fight his way to the surface. He felt more than heard another splash, and thought that Egwene must have come right after him. Panting and blowing, he treaded water. It was not easy to keep afloat. His coat and cloak were already sodden, and his boots had filled. He looked around for Egwene, but saw only the glint of moonlight on the black water, ruffled by the wind. "Egwene! Egwene!" A spear flashed right in front of his eyes and threw water in his face. Others splashed into the river around him too. Guttural voices raised an argument on the riverbank, and the Trolloc spears stopped coming. but he
Good
gave up
shit.
on
Hell
calling for
yeah.
the time being.
Lighting
The current washed him
round
downriver,
one.
but the thick shouts and snarls followed along the bank, keeping pace. Undoing his cloak, he let the river take it.
Tombstone.
A little less weight to drag him down. Doggedly, he set out swimming for the far bank. There were no Trollocs there, he hoped. He swam the way they did back home in the ponds and the waterwood, stroking with both hands, kicking with both feet, keeping his head out of the water. At least he tried to keep his head out of the water. It was not easy. Even without the cloak, his coat and boots each seemed to weigh as much as he did, and the axe dragged at his waist, threatening to roll him over if it did not pull him under. He thought about letting the river have that too. He thought about it more than once. It would be easy, much easier than struggling out of his boots, for instance. But every time he thought of it, he thought of crawling out on the far bank to find Trollocs waiting. The axe would not do him much good against half a dozen Trollocs, or even against one, maybe. But it was better than his bare hands. After a while, he was not even certain he would be able to lift the axe if Trollocs were there. His arms and legs became leaden. It was an effort to move them, and his face no longer came as far out of the river with each stroke. He coughed from water that went up his nose. Day at the forge has no odds on this, he thought wearily. And just then, his kicking foot struck something. It was not until he kicked it again that he realized what it was. The bottom. He was in the shallows. He was across the river. Sucking air through his mouth, he got to his feet, splashing about as his legs almost gave way. He fumbled his axe out of its loop as he floundered ashore, shivering in the wind. He did not see any Trollocs. He did not see Egwene either. Just a few scattered trees along the riverbank and a moonlight ribbon on the water. When he had his breath again, he called their names again and again. Faint shouts from the far side answered him. Even at that distance, he could make out the harsh voices of Trollocs. His friends did not answer, though. The wind surged, its moan drowning out the Trollocs, and he shivered. It was not cold enough to freeze the water soaking his clothes, but it felt as if it was. It sliced to the bone with an icy blade. Hugging himself was only a gesture that did not stop the shivering. Alone, he climbed tiredly up the riverbank to find shelter against the wind.
You gotta light it again.
Rand patted
Got
Cloud's
distracted
neck,
by the
sealing
game.
the gray with whispers. The horse tossed his head and danced on quick feet. The Trollocs had been left behind, or so it seemed, but Cloud had the smell of them.
Played a little while.
Matt rode with an arrow knocked,
Diablo
watching for
3.
surprises out of the night, while Rand and Tom peered through the benches, searching for the red star that was their guide. Keeping it in view had been easy enough, even with all the branches overhead, so long as they were riding straight toward it. But then more Trollocs had appeared ahead, and they went galloping off to the
Not
side
too
with
seed.
both packs howling after them. The Trollocs could keep up with a horse, but only for 100 pace or so. And finally they left the pursuit and the howls behind. But with all the twists and turns, they had lost the guiding star. I still say it's over there, Matt said, gesturing off to his right. We were going north at the end, and that means east is that way. There it is, Tom said abruptly. He pointed through the tangled branches to their left, straight at the red star. Matt mumbled something under his breath. Out of the corner of his eye, Rand caught the movement as a Trolloc leaped out from behind a tree without a sound, swinging its catchpole. Rand dug his heels in, and the gray bounded forward just as two more plunged from the shadows after the first. A noose brushed the back of Rand's neck, sending a shiver down his spine. An arrow took one of the bestial faces in the eye, then Matt swung in beside him as their horses pounded through the trees. They were running toward the river, he realized, but he was not sure it was going to do any good. The Trollocs sped after them, almost close enough to reach out and grab the streaming tails of their horses. Half a step gained, and the catchpoles could drag them both out of their saddles. He leaned low on the gray's neck to put that much more distance between his own neck and the nooses. Matt's face was nearly buried in his horse's mane, but Rand wondered where Tom was. Had the Gleeman decided he was better off on his own, since all three Trollocs had fastened on the boys? Suddenly, Tom's gelding galloped out of the night, hard behind the Trollocs. The Trollocs had only time enough to look back in surprise before the Gleeman's hands whipped back and then forward. Moonlight flashed off steel. One Trolloc tumbled forward, rolling over and landing in a heap, while a second dropped to its knees with a scream, clawing at its back with both hands. The third sprang, bearing a muzzle full of sharp teeth, but as its companions toppled, it whirled away into the darkness. Tom's hand made the whip-like motion again, and the Trolloc shrieked, but the shrieks faded into the distance as it ran. Rand and Matt pulled up and stared at the Gleeman. "My best knives," Tom muttered, but he made no effort to get down and retrieve them. "That one will bring others. I hope the river isn't too far. I hope." Instead of saying what else he hoped, he shook his head and set off at a quick canter. Rand and Matt fell in behind him. Soon they reached a low bank where trees grew right to the edge of the night-black water, its moon-streaked surface riffled by the wind. Rand could not see the far side at all. He did not like the idea of crossing on a raft in the dark, but he liked the idea of staying on this side even less. "I'll swim if I have to." Somewhere away from the river, a Trolloc horn brayed, sharp, quick, and urgent in the darkness. It was the first sound from the horns since they had left the ruins. Rand wondered if it meant some of the others had
Hey,
been captured.
T-Birds, how you doing, bro?
"No use staying here all night," Tom said. "Pick a direction, upriver or down." "But Moraine and the others could be anywhere," Matt protested. "Any way we choose could just take us further away." "So it could." Bucking to his gelding, Tom turned downriver, heading along the bank. "So it could." Rand looked at Matt, who shrugged, and they turned after him. For a time, nothing changed. The bank was higher in some places, lower in others. The trees grew thicker, or thinned out in small clearings, but the night and the river and the wind were all the same, cold and black. And no Trollocs. That was one change Rand was glad to
Hope you're
forego.
doing good, T-Bird.
Then he saw a light ahead, just a single point. As they drew closer, he could see that the light was well above the river, as if it were in a tree. Tom quickened the pace and began to hum under his breath. Finally, they could make out the source of the light, a lantern, placed atop one of the masts of a large trader's boat, tied up for the night beside a small clearing in the trees. The boat, a good 80 feet long, shifted slightly with the current, tugging against the mooring ropes tied to trees. The rigging hummed and creaked in the wind. The lantern doubled the moonlight on the deck, but no one was in sight. "That," Tom said as he dismounted, "is better than an Aes Sedai's raft, isn't it?" He stood with his hands on his hips, and even in the dark his smugness was apparent. "It doesn't look as if this vessel is made to carry horses, but considering the danger he's in, which we are going to warn him of, the captain may be reasonable. Just let me do all the talking. And bring your blankets and saddlebags, just in case." Rand
Hell yeah,
began
that's the way to
untying
do
the
it.
things behind his saddle.
I'm not doing too
"You
bad,
don't
can't
mean to leave
complain.
without the others, do you?" Tom had no chance to say what he meant to do. Into the clearing burst two Trollocs, howling and waving their catchpoles, with four more right behind. The horses reared and whinnied. Shouts in the distance said more Trollocs were on the way. "Onto the boat!" Tom shouted. "Quick! Leave all that! Run!" Suiting his own words, he ran for the boat, hatches flapping and instrument cases on his back banging together. "You're on the boat!" he shouted. "Wake up, you fools! Trollocs!" Rand jerked his blanket roll and saddlebags free of the last thong and was right on the Gleeman's heels. Tossing his burdens over the rail, he bolted after them. He just had time to see a man curled up on the deck, beginning to sit up, as if he had only that moment awakened, when his feet came down right on top of the fellow. The man grunted loudly, stumbled, and a hooked catchpole slammed into the rail just where he had come over. Shouts rose all over the boat, and feet pounded along the deck. Hairy hands caught the railing beside the catchpole, and a goat-horned head lifted above it. Off balance, stumbling, Rand still managed to draw his sword and swing. The Trolloc cocked away. Blood ran everywhere on the boat, cracking luring lines of axes. The boat smashed and swung as if eager to be off. Three men struggled with the fire. Someone thrust over the side with a spear, though Rand did not see what he was stabbing at. A bowstring snapped and snapped again. The man Rand had stepped on scrabbled away from him on hands and knees, and threw up his hands when he saw Rand looking at him.
Spare me,
He cried.
take whatever you want, take the boat, take everything, but spare me.
Suddenly something slammed across Rand's back, smashing him to the deck. His sword skittered away from his outstretched hand. Open-mouthed, gasping for a breath that would not come, he tried to reach the sword. His muscles responded with agonized slowness. He writhed like a slug. The fellow who wanted to be spared gave one frightened, covetous look at the sword, then vanished into the shadows. Painfully, Rand managed to look over his shoulder and knew his luck had run out. A wolf-muzzled Trolloc stood balanced on the railing, staring down at him, holding the splintered end of the catchpole that had knocked the wind out of him. Rand struggled to reach the sword, to move, to get away. But his arms and legs moved jerkily, and only half as he wanted. They wobbled and went in odd directions. His chest felt as if it were strapped with iron bands. Silver spots swam in his eyes. Frantically, he hunted for some way to escape. Time seemed to slow as the Trolloc raised the jagged pole as if to spear him with it. To Rand, the creature appeared to be moving as if in a dream. He watched the thick arm go back. He could already feel the broken heart ripping through his spine.
Good,
the pain of it tearing him open.
keywords.
He thought his lungs would burst.
Heal up quick, bro.
Light, help me! I'm going to. The Trolloc
Definitely heal quick, because that can't be
the splintered shaft.
What you call it? That can't be a pleasant healing.
No! Suddenly the ship lurched, and a boom swung out of the shadows to catch the Trolloc across the chest with a crunch of breaking bones, sweeping it over the side. For a moment, Rand lay panting and staring up at the boom, swinging back and forth above him. That has to have used up my luck, he thought. There can't be any more after that. Shakily, he got to his feet and picked up his sword, for once holding it in both hands the way Lan had taught him. But there was nothing left on which to use it. The gap of black water between the boat and the bank was widening quickly. The cries of Trollocs were fading behind in the night. As he sheathed his sword and slumped against the railing, a stocky man in a coat that hung to his knees strode up the deck to glare at him. Long hair that fell to his thick shoulders and a beard that left his upper lip bare framed a round face. Round, but not soft. The boom swung out again, and the bearded man spared part of his glare for that as he caught it. It made a crisp splat against his broad palm.
Gelb,
he bellowed.
Fortune. Where do you be, Gelb?
He spoke so fast, with all the words running together, that Rand could barely understand him.
You cannot hide from me on my own ship. Get Flor and Gelb out here.
A crewman appeared with a bullseye lantern, and two more pushed a narrow-faced man into the circle of light it cast. Rand recognized the fellow who had offered him the boat. The man's eye shifted from side to side, never meeting those of the stocky man. The captain, Rand thought. A bruise was coming up on Gelb's forehead where one of Rand's boots had caught him.
How are you not supposed to secure this boom, Gelb?
The captain asked with surprising calm, though just as fast as before. Gelb looked truly surprised.
But I did. Tied it down tight. I admit I'm a little slow about things now and then, Captain Doman. But I get them done. So you be slow, do you? No, so slow at sleeping. Sleeping when you should be standing watch. We could be murdered to a man for all of you. No, Captain, no. It was him.
Gelb pointed straight at Rand.
I was on guard, just like I was supposed to be, when he sneaked up and hit me with a club.
He raised the bruise on his head, winced, and glared at Rand.
I fought him, but then the Trollocs came. He's in league with them, Captain. A dark friend. In league with the Trollocs. In league with my aged grandmother,
Captain Doman roared.
Did I not warn you the last time, Gelb? At Whitebridge? Off you do go. Get out of my sight before I put you off now.
Gelb darted out of the lantern light, and Doman stood, opening and closing his hands while he stared at nothing.
These Trollocs do be following me. Why will they not leave me be? Bye.
Rand looked over the rail and was shocked to find the riverbank no longer in sight. 2 men manned the long steering oar that stuck out over the stern, and there were 6 sweeps working to a side now, pulling the ship like a water bug further out into the river. "Captain," Rand said, "we have friends back there. If you go back and pick them up, I am sure they'll reward you." The captain's round face swung toward Rand, and when Tom and Matt appeared, he included them in his expressionless stare as well. "Captain," Tom began with a bow, "allow me to." "You come below," Captain Doman said, "where I can see what manner of thing be hauled up on my deck. Come. Fortune desert me. Somebody secure this horde-cursed boom." As crewmen rushed to take the boom, he stumped off toward the stern of the boat. Rand and his 2 companions followed. Captain Doman had a tidy cabin in the stern, reached by climbing down a short ladder. Everything gave the impression of being in its proper place, right down to the coats and cloaks hanging from pegs on the back of the door. The cabin stretched the width of the ship, with a broad bed built against
That
one
one,
side.
he's of
A
age.
heavy
He
table
has
built
that
out
for his
from the other.
picture, T-Birds.
There was only one
He
chair
comes
with
to,
a high back and sturdy arms, and the captain took that
I
himself,
think.
motioning the others to find places on various chests.
That's the
and
one that
benches,
comes from
except for
my
the young
brother's
apprentices.
chat.
A loud harumph.
I'm not sure why he has that picture there.
"No," said the captain, when they were all seated. "My name be
I was about ready to
captain and owner of the Spring,
hide him, but
which be this ship. Now who be you? And where be you going out here in the middle of nowhere? And why should I not throw you over the side for the trouble you've brought me?" Rand still had as much trouble as before in following Doman's rapid speech. When he worked out the last part of what the captain had said, he blinked in surprise. "Throw us over the side?" Matt hurriedly said, "We didn't mean to cause you any trouble. We're on our way to Camelin and then to..." "And then where the wind takes us," Tom interrupted smoothly. "That's how gleemen travel, like dust on the wind. I am a gleeman, you understand. Tom Maryland by name." He shifted his cloak so the multi-hued patches stirred as if the captain could have missed them. "These 2 country louts want to become my apprentices, though I am not yet sure I want them." Rand looked at Matt, who grinned. "That be all very well, man," Captain Doman said placidly, "but it tells me nothing. Bless! Fortune prick me. That place be on no road to Canaan from anywhere I ever heard tell of." "Now that is a story," Tom said, and he straightway began to unfold it. According to Tom, he had been trapped by the winter snows in a mining town in the mountains of mist beyond Berlon. While there, he heard legends of a treasure dating from the...
Battery low. Battery 10%.
Now it just so happened.
I know. I'm
that
not
he had
sure
earlier
why
learned the
he has
location
it
of
like
Hard
that.
Hall from a map given him many years ago by a dying friend in Ilion, whose life he had once saved. The man who expired breathing that the map would make Tom rich, which Tom never believed until he heard the legends. He set out with a few companions, including his 2 would-be apprentices, and after a journey of many hardships, they actually found the ruined city. But it turned out the treasure had belonged to one of the Dreadlords themselves, and Pt.6 had been sent to fetch it back to Sheol Ghul. The they really had faced, Pt.6, Murdral, Prakar, Mordith, Mashadar, assailed them at one point or
I
another
know
of
what
the
you're
story.
saying,
Though the way
Ryan.
Tom told it, they all seemed to be aimed at him personally, and to have been handled by him with the greatest adroitness. With much daring do, mostly by Tom, they escaped, pursued by Pt.6, though they became separated in the night, till finally Tom and his 2 companions sought refuge
No, let
in the
me do
last place
something
left of
real
them,
quick.
Captain Doman's most welcome ship. As the gleeman finished up, Rand realized his mouth had been hanging open for some
There you
time,
go.
and shut it with a click. When he looked at Matt, his friend was
Give you a
staring
little bit
wide-eyed at the gleeman.
more say-so in the
Captain
matter.
Doman drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair. "That be a tale many folk would no believe. Of course, I did see the Trollocs, did I know?" "Every word true," Tom said blandly, "from one who lived it." "Happen you have some of this treasure with you?" Tom spread his hands regretfully. "Alas, what little we managed to carry away was with our horses, which bolted when those last Trollocs appeared. All I have left are my flute and my harp, a few coppers, and the clothes on my back. But believe me, You want no part of that treasure. It has the taint of the Dark One. Best to leave it to the ruins and the Trollocs. So you've no money to pay your passage. I'd no let my own brother sail with me if he could no pay his passage. Especially if he brought Trollocs behind him to hack up my railings.
Hey, no problem, T-Birds.
Why should I no let you swim back where you came from and be rid of you? You wouldn't just put us ashore, Matt said. Not with Trollocs there. Who said anything about shore? Duman replied dryly. He studied them a moment, then spread his hands flat on the table. Bill Dolman, be a reasonable man. I'd not toss you over the side if there be a way out of it. Now, I see one of your apprentices has a sword. I need a good sword, and fine fellow that I be, I'll let you have passage far as Whitebridge for it. Tom opened his mouth, and Rand spoke up quickly. No. Tam had not given it to him to trade away. He ran his hand down the hilt, feeling the bronze heron. As long as he had it, it was as if Tam were with him. He shook his head. Well, if it be no, it be no. But Bill Dolman no give free passage, not to his own mother. Reluctantly, Rand emptied his pocket. There was not much, a few coppers, and the silver coin Moraine had given him. He held it out to the captain. After a second,
was doing good out
Matt
there
sighed
today.
and did the same. Tom glared, but a smile replaced it so quickly that Rand was not sure it had been there at all. Captain Dolman deftly plucked the 2 fat silver coins out of the boy's hands and produced a small set of scales and a clinking bag from a brass-bound chest behind his chair. After careful weighing, he dropped the coins in the bag and returned them each some smaller silver and copper. Mostly copper. As far as Whitebridge, he said, making a neat entry in his leather-bound ledger. That's a dear passage just to Whitebridge, Tom grumbled. Plus damages to my vessel, the captain answered placidly. He put the scales in the bag back in the chest and closed it in a satisfied way. Plus a bit for bringing Trollocs down on me, so I must run down river in the night, when there be shallows aplenty to pile me up. What about the others, Rand said?
Oh, unfortunately, it wasn't too bad.
Reach the river
I mainly stayed in just because
and they'll see that lantern
me
on your
and
mast.
fireworks, I tend to stay
Captain
away from
Dolman's
them ever
eyebrows
since
rose in surprise.
I blew my thumb off.
Happen you think we'd be standing still, man? Fortune prick me. We be 3-4 miles downriver from where you came aboard. Trollocs make those fellows put their backs to the oars. They know Trollocs better than they like. And the current helps too. But it makes no never mind. I'd no put in again tonight if my old grandmother was on the riverbank. I may no put in again at all until I reach Whitebridge. I've had my fill of Trollocs dug in my heels long before tonight. Not no more, can I help it? Forward interestedly. I've been tramping with Trollocs before. Lately. He hesitated, eyeing Tom narrowly,
This
but when
was
he
some
spoke, he merely
wedding
sounded
cake.
disgusted. I wintered in Sardinia. Not my choice.
Let's try
But the
some
river froze early, and the ice
key
broke
lime
up late.
pie.
They say you can see the blight from the highest towers in Moradon, but I've no mind for that. I've been there before, and there'll always be talk of Trollocs attacking a farm or the like. This winter past, though, there'll be farms burning every night. Aye, and whole villages too,
Right,
betimes.
because they're able
right
to.
up to the city walls.
Let me do
And if
this
that be no
first
bad
and
enough,
not show
People
you.
be all saying it meant the Dark One be stirring. That the last day would come.
Excuse me.
He gave a shiver and scratched at his head, as if the thought made his scalp itch. I can no wait to get back where people think Trollocs be just tales. The stories I tell be travelers' lies. Rand stopped listening. He stared at the opposite wall and thought about Egwene and the others. It hardly seemed right for him to be safe on the spray, while they were still back there in the night somewhere. The captain's cabin did not seem so comfortable as before. He was surprised when Tom pulled him to his feet. He pushed Matt and him toward the ladder with apologies to Captain Dolman for the country louts. Rand climbed up without a word.
Well, you can see how this
Once they
one
were
is
on deck,
compared to
Tom
how.
looked around quickly to make
that
sure he
one
would not
is.
be overheard, then growled. I could have gotten
Because it
this
was
passage for a few songs and stories if you hadn't been so quick to
pretty
show
much from
silver.
here
I'm
to.
not so sure,
Rand
right
said.
here.
He sounded serious
So it
about
only
throwing
held
the
on
river
by
to me.
about
Rand
that
walked
much.
slowly to the rail and leaned against it, staring back up the night-shrouded river. He could not see anything but black,
You see
not
more
even the
story
river
there.
bank. After a minute, Tom put a hand
And
on his
especially
shoulder,
how
but he did not move.
that one is.
There isn't anything you can do, lad. Besides, they're likely safe with Moraine and Lamb by this time. Can you think of any better than those two for getting the lost one? Man said, "You did what you could, lad. No one could ask more. I told her I'd take care of her. I should have tried harder." The creak of the sweeps and the hum of the rigging in the wind made a mournful tune. "I should have tried harder," whispered.
Chapter 21. Listen to the wind. Sunrise creeping across the river Arenelle found its way into the hollow not far from the riverbank, where Nynaeve sat with her back against the trunk of a young oak, breathing the deep breath of sleep. Her horse slept, too, head down and legs spraddled in the manner of horses. The reins were wrapped around her wrist. As sunlight fell on the horse's eyelids, the animal opened its eyes and raised its head, jerking the reins. Nynaeve came awake with a start. For a moment she stared, wondering where she was, then stared around even more wildly when she remembered. But there were only the trees and her horse, and a carpet of old, dry leaves across the bottom of the hollow. In the deepest dimness, some of last year's shadow's hand mushrooms made rings on a fallen log. "The light preserve you, woman," she murmured, sagging back. "If you can't stay awake one night." She untied the reins and massaged her wrist as she stood. "You could have awakened in a Trolloc cook-pot." The dead leaves rustled as she climbed to the lip of the hollow and peeped over. No more than a handful of ash trees stood between her and the river. Their fissured bark and bare branches made them seem dead. Beyond, the wide blue-green water flowed by, empty. Empty of anything. Scattered clumps of evergreens, willows, and firs dotted the far bank, and there seemed to be fewer trees altogether than on her side. If Moiraine or any of the younglings were over there, they were well hidden. Of course, there was no reason they had to have crossed or tried to cross in sight of where she was. They could be anywhere 10 miles upriver or down, if they're alive at all after last night. Angry with herself for thinking of the possibility, she slid back down into the hollow. Not even Winter Night, or the battle before Shadar Logoth, had prepared her for last night, for that thing, Mashadar. All that frantic galloping, wondering if anyone else was still alive, wondering when she was going to come face to face with a Fade or Trollocs. She had heard Trollocs growling and shouting in the distance, and the quivering shrieks of Trolloc horns had chilled her deeper than the wind ever could. But aside from that first encounter in the ruins, she saw Trollocs only once, and that once she was outside. 10 or so of them seemed to spring out of the ground not 30 spans in front of her, bounding toward her on the instant, howling and shouting, brandishing hooked catch-poles. Yet as she pulled her horse around, they fell silent, lifting muzzles to sniff at the air. She watched, too astonished to run, as they turned their backs and vanished into the night. And that had been the most frightening of all.
Okay,
"They know the
cool.
smell of who they want," she told her horse, standing
Yeah,
in the
because with
hollow.
that picture,
"And
it makes
is
it look
not
like
me." The Aes
you
Sedai's
shouldn't be in
right, it
this
seemed.
stream.
The shepherd of the night swallow her up. Reaching a decision, she set out downriver, leading her horse. She moved slowly, keeping a wary watch on the forest around her. Just because the Trollocs had not wanted her last night did not mean they would let her go if she stumbled on them again. As much attention as she gave the woods, she gave even more to the ground in front of her. If the others had
That
crossed
bro's
below her
doing
during
good.
the night, she should see some signs of them, signs she might miss from horseback. She might even come on them all still on this side. If she found neither, the river would take her to Whitebridge eventually, and there was a road from Whitebridge to Camelin, and all the way to Tar Valon if need be. The prospect was almost enough to daunt her. Before this, she had been no further from Emmons' Field than had the boys. Tara and Ferry had seemed strange to her. There, Lon would have had her staring in wonder if she had not been so set on finding Egwene and the others. But she allowed none of that to weaken her resolve. Sooner or later she would find Egwene and the boys, or find a way to make the Aes Sedai answer for whatever had happened to them. One or the other, she vowed. At intervals she found tracks, plenty of them, but usually her best efforts could not say whether those who made them had been searching or chasing or pursued.
I'm a little
Some had
distracted.
been made by boots that could have belonged to humans or Trollocs, either one.
Or somewhat of a
Others were
challenge I got to
movements
do
like
on
goats or
Diablo
oxen.
3.
Those were Trollocs for sure, but never a clear sign that she could definitely say came from any of those she sought. She had covered perhaps 4 miles when the wind brought her a whiff of wood smoke. It came from further downriver, and not too far, she thought. She hesitated only a moment before tying her horse to a fir tree, well back from the river in a small, thick stand of evergreens that should keep the animal hidden. The smoke could mean Trollocs, but the only way to find out was to look. She tried not to think about the use Trollocs might be making of a fire. Crouching, she slipped from tree to tree, mentally cursing the skirts she had to hold up out of the way. Dresses were not made for stalking. The sound of a horse slowed her, and when she finally peered cautiously around the trunk of an ash, the warder was dismounting from his black warhorse in a small clearing on the bank. The Aes Sedai sat on a log beside a small fire, where a kettle of water was just coming to a boil. Her white mare browsed behind her among sparse weeds. Nynaeve remained where she was. "They are all gone," Lan announced grimly. "4 halfmen started south about 2 hours before dawn, as near as I can tell. They don't leave much trace behind. But the Trollocs have vanished, even the corpses, and Trollocs are not known for carrying off their dead, unless they're hungry."
Hell yeah. That's definitely some
Moiraine
good luck
tossed a
there.
handful of something into the boiling water and moved the kettle from the fire. One
This
could always
shouldn't be
hope
too
they had
much of a
gone back
problem.
into Shadar Logoth and
I'm
been
on
consumed by it, but that would be
Diablo
too much to wish
3
for.
Reaper
The
Souls,
delicious
and I'm
odor
playing
of
on
tea drifted to Nynaeve.
Torment
Light,
4.
don't let my stomach grumble. There was no clear sign of the boys or any of the others. The tracks are too muddled to tell anything. In her concealment, Nynaeve smiled. The warder's failure was a slight vindication of her own. "But this other is important, Moiraine," Lan went on, frowning. He waved away the Aes Sedai's offer of tea and began marching up and down in front of the fire, one hand on his sword hilt and his cloak changing colors as he turned. "I could accept Trollocs in 2 rivers, even 100 Trollocs, but this? There must have been almost 1,000 in the hunt for us yesterday." "We were very lucky that not all stayed to search Shadar Logoth. The Murdral must have doubted we would hide there, but they also feared to return to Sheol Ghul, leaving even the slightest chance uncovered. The Dark One was never a lenient master. Don't try to evade it. You know what I'm saying. If those 1,000 were here to be sent into the 2 rivers, why were they not? There is only one answer. They were sent only after we crossed the Taran, when it was known that 1 Murdral and 100 Trollocs were no longer enough. How? How were they sent? If 1,000 Trollocs can be brought so far south from the Blight, so quickly, unseen, not to mention being taken off the same way, can 10,000 be sent into the heart of Saldaea, or Arafel, or Shinar? The borderlands could be overrun in a year. The whole world will be overrun in 5 if we do not find those boys, Moiraine said simply. The question worries me also, but I have no answers. The ways are closed, and there has not been an Aes Sedai powerful enough to travel since the time of madness. Unless one of the Forsaken is loose, the light send it is not so, yet or ever. There is still no one who can. In any case, I do not think all the Forsaken together could move 1,000 Trollocs. Let us deal with the problems that face us here and now. Everything else must wait. The boys. It was not a question. I have not been idle while you were away. One is across the river and alive. As for the others, there was a faint trace downriver, but it faded away as I found it. The bond had been broken for hours before I began my search. Crouched behind her tree, Nynaeve frowned in puzzlement. Lan stopped his pacing. You think the half-men heading south have them? Perhaps. Moiraine poured herself a cup of tea before going on. But I will not admit the possibility of them being dead. I cannot. I dare not. You know how much is at stake. I must have those young men. That Sheol ghoul will hunt them, I expect. Opposition from within the White Tower, even from the Amerlin seat, I accept.
Oh yeah,
There are
T-Bird.
always eyes
You
that
have a
eye
good rest of
who
your
will
night
accept
too,
only
bro.
one solution.
I appreciate you stopping by, brother.
Suddenly she put her cup down and sat up straight, grimacing. If you watch the wolf too hard, she muttered, a mouse will bite you on the ankle. And she looked right at the tree behind which Nynaeve was hiding. Mistress Almira, you may come out now if you wish. Nynaeve scrambled to her feet, hastily dusting dead leaves from her dress. Lan had spun to face the tree as soon as Moiraine's eyes moved. His sword was in his hand before she finished speaking Nynaeve's name. Now he sheathed it again with more force than was strictly necessary. His face was almost as expressionless as ever, but Nynaeve thought there was a touch of chagrin about the set of his mouth. She felt a stab of satisfaction. The warder had not known she was there, at least. Satisfaction lasted only a moment, though. She fastened her eyes on Moiraine and walked toward her purposefully. She wanted to remain cold and calm, but her voice quivered with anger. What have you meshed Egwene and the boys in? What filthy Aes Sedai plots are you planning to use them in? The Aes Sedai picked up her cup and calmly sipped her tea. When Nynaeve was close, though, Lan put out an arm to bar her way. She tried to brush the obstruction aside and was surprised when the warder's arm moved no more than an oak branch would have. She was not frail, but his muscles were like iron. Tea? Moiraine offered. No, I don't want any tea. I would not drink your tea if I was dying of thirst. You won't use any Emmons Field folk in your dirty Aes Sedai schemes. You have very little room to talk, Wisdom. Moiraine showed more interest in her hot tea than in anything she was saying. You can wield the one power yourself after a fashion. Nynaeve pushed at Lan's arm again. It still did not move, and she decided to ignore it. Why don't you try claiming I'm a Trolloc? Moiraine's smile was so knowing that Nynaeve wanted to hit her. Do you think I can stand face to face with a woman who can touch the true source and channel the one power, even if only now and then, without knowing what she is? Just as you sense the potential in Egwene. How do you think I knew you were behind that tree? If I'd not been distracted, I would have known the moment you came close. You certainly are not a Trolloc for me to feel the evil of the Dark One. So what did I sense, Nynaeve Almira, wisdom of Emmons Field and unknowing wielder of the one power? Lan was looking down at Nynaeve in a way she did not like. Surprised and speculative it seemed to her, though nothing had changed about his face but his eyes. Egwene was special. She'd always known that. Egwene would make a fine wisdom. They're working together, she thought, trying to put me off balance. I won't listen to any more of this. You must listen, Moiraine said firmly. I had my suspicions in Emmons Field even before I met you. People told me how upset the wisdom was that she had not predicted the hard winter and the lateness of spring. They told me how good she was at foretelling weather, at telling the crops. They told me how wonderful her cures were, how she sometimes healed injuries that should have been crippling so well there was barely a scar and not a limp or a twinge. The only ill word I heard about you was from a few who thought you too young for the responsibility, and that only strengthened my suspicions. So much skill, so young. Mistress Barron taught me well. She tried looking at Lan, but his eyes still made her uncomfortable, so she settled for staring over the Aes Sedai's head at the river. How dare the village gossip in front of an outlander? Who said I was too young? She demanded. Moiraine smiled, refusing to be diverted. Unlike most women who claim to listen to the wind, you actually can, sometimes. Oh, it has nothing to do with the wind, of course. It is of air and water. It is not something you need to be taught. It was born into you, just as it was born into Egwene. But you have learned to handle it, which she still has to learn. 2 minutes after I came face to face with you, I knew. Do you remember how I suddenly asked you if you were the wisdom? Why, do you think? There was nothing to distinguish you from any other pretty young woman getting ready for festival. Even looking for a young wisdom, I expected someone half again your age. Nynaeve remembered that meeting all too well. This woman, more self-possessed than anyone in the women's circle, in a dress more beautiful than any she'd ever seen, addressing her as a child. Then Moiraine had suddenly blinked, as if surprised, and out of a clear sky asked. She licked lips, gone abruptly dry. They were both looking at her, the warder's face as unreadable as a stone, the Aes Sedai's sympathetic yet intent. Nynaeve shook her head. No, no, it's impossible. I would know. You are just trying to trick me, and it will not work. Of course you do not know, Moiraine said soothingly. Why should you even suspect? All of your life you have heard about listening to the wind. In any case, you would as soon announce to all of Emond's Field that you were a dark friend as admit to yourself, even in the deepest recesses of your mind, that you have anything to do with the One Power, or the dreaded Aes Sedai. Amusement flitted across Moiraine's face. But I can tell you how it began. I don't want to hear any more of your lies, she said, but the Aes Sedai went right on. Perhaps as much as 8 or 10 years ago, the age varies but always comes young, there was something you wanted more than anything else in the world, something you needed, and you got it. A branch suddenly falling where you could pull yourself out of a pond instead of drowning, a friend or a pet getting well when everyone thought they would die. You felt nothing special at the time, but a week or 10 days later you had your first reaction to touching the true source. Perhaps fevers and chills that came on suddenly and put you to bed, then disappeared after only a few hours. None of the reactions, and they vary, lasts more than a few hours. Headaches and numbness and exhilaration all mixed together, and you taking foolish chances or acting giddy. A spell of dizziness when you tripped and stumbled whenever you tried to move, when you could not say a sentence without your tongue mangling half the words. There are others. Do you remember? Nynaeve sat down hard on the ground. Her legs would not hold her up. She remembered, but she shook her head anyway. It had to be coincidence. Or else Moiraine had asked more questions in Emond's Field than she had thought. The Aes Sedai had asked a great many questions. It had to be that. Lan offered a hand, but she did not even see it. I will go further, Moiraine said when Nynaeve kept silent. You used the power to heal either Perrin or Egwene at some time. An affinity develops. You can sense the presence of someone you have healed. In Baerlon, you came straight to the Stag and Lion, though it was not the nearest inn to any gate by which you could have entered. Of the people from Emond's Field, only Perrin and Egwene were at the inn when you arrived. Was it Perrin or Egwene, or both? Egwene, Nynaeve mumbled. She'd always taken it for granted that she could sometimes tell who was approaching her even when she could not see them. Not until now had she realized that it was always someone on whom her cures had worked almost miraculously well. And she had always known when the medicine would work beyond expectations, always felt the certainty when she said the crops would be especially good, or that the rains would come early or late. That was the way she thought it was supposed to be. Not all wisdoms could listen to the wind, but the best could. That was what Mistress Barron always said, just as she said Nynaeve would be one of the best. She had breakbone fever. She kept her head down and spoke to the ground. I was still apprenticed to Mistress Barron, and she set me to watch Egwene. I was young, and I didn't know the wisdom had everything well in hand. It's terrible to watch, breakbone fever. The child was soaked with sweat, groaning and twisting until I could not understand why I didn't hear her bones snapping. Mistress Barron had told me the fever would break in another day, 2 at the most, but I thought she was doing me a kindness. I thought Egwene was dying. I used to look after her sometimes when she was a toddler, when her mother was busy, and I started crying because I was going to have to watch her die. When Mistress Barron came back an hour later, the fever had broken. She was surprised, but she made over me more than Egwene. I always thought she believed I'd given the child something and was too frightened to admit it. I always thought she was trying to comfort me, to make sure I knew I hadn't hurt Egwene. A week later, I fell on the floor in her sitting room, shaking and burning up by turns. She bundled me into bed, but by supper time it was gone. She dropped her head in her hands as she finished speaking. The Aes Sedai chose a good example, she thought. Light burn her, using the power like an Aes Sedai, a filthy, dark friend Aes Sedai. You were very lucky, Moiraine said, and Nynaeve sat erect. Lan stepped back as if what they talked about was none of his business, and busied himself with Mandarb's saddle, not even glancing at them. Lucky? You have managed a crude control over the power, even if touching the true source still comes at random. If you had not, it would have killed you eventually. As it will, in all probability, kill Egwene, if you manage to stop her from going to Tar Valon. If I learned to control it, Nynaeve swallowed hard. It was like admitting all over again that she could do what the Aes Sedai said. If I learned to control it, so can she. There is no need for her to go to Tar Valon and get mixed up in your intrigues. Moiraine shook her head slowly. Aes Sedai search for girls who can touch the true source unguided just as assiduously as we search for men who can do so. It is not a desire to increase our numbers, or at least not only that. Nor is it a fear that those women will misuse the power. The rough control of the power they may gain if the light shines on them is rarely enough to do any great damage, especially since the actual touching of the source is beyond their control without a teacher, and comes only randomly. And of course, they do not suffer the madness that drives men to evil or twisted things. We want to save their lives, the lives of those who never do manage any control at all. The fever and chills I had couldn't kill anyone, Nynaeve insisted. Not in 3 or 4 hours. I had the other things too, and they couldn't kill anybody either, and they stopped after a few months. What about that? Those were only reactions, Moiraine said patiently. Each time the reaction comes closer to the actual touching of the source, until the two happen almost together. After that, there are no more reactions that can be seen, but it is as if a clock has begun ticking. A year, 2 years. I know one woman who lasted 5 years. Of 4 who have the inborn ability that you and Egwene have, 3 die if we do not find them and train them. It is not as horrible a death as the men die, but neither is it pretty, if any death can be called so. Convulsions, screaming. It takes days, and once it begins, there is nothing that can be done to stop it. Not by all the Aes Sedai and Tar Valon together. You're lying. All those questions you asked in Emond's Field. You found out about Egwene's fever breaking, about my fever and chills, all of it. You made all of this up. You know I did not, Moiraine said gently. Reluctantly, more reluctantly than she had ever done anything in her life, Nynaeve nodded. It had been a last stubborn effort to deny what was plain, and there was never any good in that, however unpleasant it might be. Mistress Barron's first apprentice had died the way the Aes Sedai said when Nynaeve was still playing with dolls, and there'd been a young woman in Devon Ride only a few years ago. She had been a wisdom's apprentice too, one who could listen to the wind. You have great potential, I think, Moiraine continued. With training, you might become even more powerful than Egwene, and I believe she can become one of the most powerful Aes Sedai we have seen in centuries. Nynaeve pushed herself back from the Aes Sedai as she would have from a viper. No! I'll have nothing to do with... With what? Myself? She slumped, and her voice became hesitant. I would ask you not to tell anyone about this. Please. The word nearly stuck in her throat. She would rather Trollocs had appeared than she had been forced to say please to this woman. But Moiraine only nodded assent, and some of her spirit returned. None of this explains what you want with Rand and Mat and Perrin. The Dark One wants them, Moiraine replied. If the Dark One wants a thing, I oppose it. Can there be a simpler reason, or a better? She finished her tea, watching Nynaeve over the rim of her cup. Lan, we must be going. South, I think. I fear the wisdom will not be accompanying us. Nynaeve's mouth tightened at the way the Aes Sedai said wisdom. It seemed to suggest she was turning her back on great things in favor of something petty. She doesn't want me along. She's trying to put my back up so I'll go back home and leave them alone with her. Oh yes, I will be going with you. You cannot keep me from it. No one will try to keep you from it, Lan said as he rejoined them. He emptied the tea kettle over the fire and stirred the ashes with a stick. A part of the pattern, he said to Moiraine. Perhaps so, she replied thoughtfully. I should have spoken to Min again. You see, Nynaeve, you are welcome to come. There was a hesitation in the way Lan said her name, a hint of an unspoken Sedai after it. Nynaeve bristled, taking it for mockery, and bristled too at the way they spoke of things in front of her, things she knew nothing about, without the courtesy of an explanation, but she would not give them the satisfaction of asking. The warder went on preparing for departure, his economical motions so sure and swift that he was quickly done, saddlebags, blankets, and all fastened behind the saddles of Mandarb and Aldi. I will fetch your horse, he told Nynaeve, as he finished with the last saddle tie. He started up the riverbank, and she allowed herself a small smile. After the way she had watched him undiscovered, he was going to try to find her horse unaided. He would learn that she left little in the way of tracks when she was stalking. It would be a pleasure when he came back empty-handed. Why south? She asked Moiraine. I heard you say one of the boys is across the river, and how do you know? I gave each of the boys a token. It created a bond of sorts between them and me. So long as they are alive and have those coins in their possession, I will be able to find them. Nynaeve's eyes turned in the direction the warder had gone, and Moiraine shook her head. Not like that. It only allows me to discover if they still live, and find them should we become separated. Prudent, do you not think, under the circumstances? I don't like anything that connects you with anyone from Emmons Field, Nynaeve said stubbornly. But if it will help us find them, it will. I would gather the young man across the river first if I could. For a moment, frustration tinged the Aes Sedai's voice. He is only a few miles from us, but I cannot afford to take the time. He should make his way down to Whitebridge safely now that the Trollocs have gone. The two who went downriver may need me more. They have lost their coins, and Myrddraal are either pursuing them or else trying to intercept us all at Whitebridge. She sighed. I must take care of the greatest need first. The Myrddraal could have killed them, Nynaeve said. Moiraine shook her head slightly, denying the suggestion as if it were too trivial to be considered. Nynaeve's mouth tightened. Where is Egwene, then? You haven't even mentioned her. I do not know, Moiraine admitted, but I hope that she is safe. You don't know? You hope? All that talk about saving her life by taking her to Tar Valon, and she could be dead for all you know. I could look for her, and allow the Myrddraal more time before I arrive to help the two young men who went south. It is them the Dark One wants, not her. They would not bother with Egwene, so long as their true quarry remains uncaught. Nynaeve remembered her own encounter, but she refused to admit the sense of what Moiraine said. So the best you have to offer is that she may be alive, if she was lucky. Alive, maybe alone, frightened, even hurt, days from the nearest village or help except for us, and you intend to leave her. She may just as easily be safe with the boy across the river, or on her way to Whitebridge with the other two. In any case, there are no longer Trollocs here to threaten her, and she is strong, intelligent, and quite capable of finding her way to Whitebridge alone if need be. Would you rather stay on the chance that she may need help, or do you want to try to help those we know are in need? Would you have me search for her and let the boys and the Myrddraal, who are surely pursuing them, go? As much as I hope for Egwene's safety, Nynaeve, I fight against the Dark One, and for now that sets my path. Moraine's calm never slipped while she laid out the horrible alternatives. Nynaeve wanted to scream at her. Blinking back tears, she turned her face so the Aes Sedai could not see. Light. A wisdom is supposed to look after all of her people. Why do I have to choose like this? Here is Lan, Moiraine said, rising and settling her cloak about her shoulders. To Nynaeve, it was only a tiny blow as the warder led her horse out of the trees. Still, her lips thinned when he handed her the reins. It would have been a small boost to her spirits if there had been even a trace of gloating on his face, instead of that insufferable stony calm. His eyes widened when he saw her face, and she turned her back on him to wipe tears from her cheeks. How dare he mock my crying? Are you coming, Wisdom? Moiraine asked coolly. She took one last slow look at the forest, wondering if Egwene was out there before sadly mounting her horse. Lan and Moiraine were already in their saddles, turning their horses south. She followed stiff-backed, refusing to let herself look back. Instead, she kept her eyes on Moiraine. The Aes Sedai was so confident in her power and her plans, she thought, but if they did not find Egwene and the boys, all of them, alive and unharmed, not all of her power would protect her. Not all her power. I can use it, woman. You told me so yourself. I can use it against you.
Chapter 22. A Path Chosen. In a small copse of trees beneath a pile of cedar branches roughly cut in the dark, Perrin slept long after sunrise. It was the cedar needles pricking him through his still damp clothes that finally pricked through his exhaustion as well. Deep in a dream of Emond's Field, of working at Master Luhan's forge, he opened his eyes and stared, uncomprehendingly, at the sweet-smelling branches interwoven over his face, sunlight trickling through. Most of the branches fell away as he sat up in surprise, but some hung haphazardly from his shoulders and even his head, making him appear something like a tree himself. Emond's Field faded as memory rushed back, so vivid that for a moment the night before seemed more real than anything around him now. Panting, frantic, he scrabbled his axe out of the pile. He clutched it in both hands and peered around cautiously, holding his breath. Nothing moved. The morning was cold and still. If there were Trollocs on the east bank of the Arenal, they were not moving, or at least not close to him. Taking a deep, calming breath, he lowered the axe to his knees and waited a moment for his heart to stop pounding. The small stand of evergreens surrounding him was the first shelter he had found last night. It was sparse enough to give little protection against watching eyes if he stood up. Plucking branches from his head and shoulders, he pushed aside the rest of his prickly blanket, then crawled on hands and knees to the edge of the copse. There he lay, studying the riverbank and scratching where the needles had stabbed him. The cutting wind of the night before had faded to a silent breeze that barely rippled the surface of the water. The river ran by, calm and empty, and wide. Surely too wide and too deep for Fades to cross. The far bank appeared a solid mass of trees as far as he could see upriver and down. Certainly nothing moved in his view over there. He was not sure how he felt about that. Fades and Trollocs he could do without quite easily, even on the other side of the river. But a whole list of worries would have vanished with the appearance of the Aes Sedai, or the warder, or even better, any of his friends. If wishes were wings, sheep would fly. That was what Mistress Luhan always said. He had not seen a sign of his horse since riding over the bluff. He hoped it had swum out of the river safely, but he was more used to walking than riding anyway, and his boots were stout and well-soled. He had nothing to eat, but his sling was still wrapped around his waist, and that, or the snare lines in his pocket, ought to yield a rabbit in a little time. Everything for making a fire was gone with his saddlebags, but the cedar trees would yield tinder and a fire bow with a bit of work. He shivered as the breeze gusted into his hiding place. His cloak was somewhere in the river, and his coat and everything else he wore were still clammy cold from the soaking in the river. He had been too tired of the cold and damp to bother him last night, but now he was wide awake to every chill. Just the same, he decided against hanging his clothes in the branches to dry. If the day was not precisely cold, it was not even close to warm. Time was the problem, he thought with a sigh. Dry clothes with a little time, a rabbit to roast and the fire to roast it over with a little time. His stomach rumbled, and he tried to forget about eating altogether. There were more important uses for that time. One thing at a time, and the most important first. That was his way. His eyes followed the strong flow of the Arnell downriver. He was a stronger swimmer than Egwene. If she had made it across, no, not if. The place where she had made it across would be downriver. He drummed on the ground with his fingers, weighing, considering. His decision made, he wasted no time in picking up his axe and setting off downriver. This side of the Arnell lacked the thick forest to the west bank. Clumps of trees spotted across what would be grassland if spring ever came. Some were big enough to be called thickets, with swaths of evergreens among the barren ash and alder and hardgum. Down by the river, the stands were smaller and not so tight. They gave poor cover, but they were all the cover there was. He dashed from growth to growth in a crouch, throwing himself down when he was among the trees to study the riverbanks, the far side as well as his. The warder said the river would be a barrier to fades and trollocs, but would it? Seeing him might be enough to overcome their reluctance to cross deep water. So he watched carefully from behind the trees and ran from one hiding place to the next, fast and low. He covered several miles that way, in spurts, until suddenly, halfway to the beckoning shelter of a growth of willows, he grunted and stopped dead, staring at the ground. Patches of bare earth spotted the matted brown of last year's grass, and in the middle of one of those patches, right under his nose, was a clear hoofprint. A slow smile spread across his face. Some Trollocs had hooves, but he doubted if any wore horseshoes, especially horseshoes with the double crossbar Master Luhan added for strength. Forgetting possible lies on the other side of the river, he cast about for more tracks. The plaited carpet of dead grass did not take impressions well, but his sharp eyes found them anyway. The scanty trail led him straight away from the river to a dense stand of trees, thick with leather leaf and cedar, that made a wall against wind or prying eyes. The spreading branches of a lone hemlock towered in the middle of it all. Still grinning, he pushed his way through the interwoven branches, not caring how much noise he made. Abruptly, he stepped into a little clearing under the hemlock and stopped. Behind a small fire, Egwene crouched, her face grim, with a thick branch held like a club and her back against Bella's flank. "I guess I should have called out," he said with an abashed shrug. Tossing her club down, she ran to throw her arms around him. "I thought you had drowned. You're still wet. Here, sit by the fire and warm yourself. You lost your horse, didn't you?" He let her push him to a place by the fire and rubbed his hands over the flames, grateful for the warmth. She produced an oiled paper packet from her saddlebags and gave him some bread and cheese. The package had been so tightly wrapped that even after its dunking, the food was dry. "Here you were worrying about her, and she's done better than you did." "Bella got me across," Egwene said, patting the shaggy mare. "She headed away from the Trollocs and just towed me along." She paused. "I haven't seen anybody else, Mare." He heard the unspoken question. Regretfully eyeing the packet that she was rewrapping, he licked the last crumbs from his fingers before speaking. "I've seen no one but you since last night. No Fades or Trollocs either. There's that." "Brand has to be all right," Egwene said, quickly adding, "They all do. They have to. They're probably looking for us right now. They might find us any time now. Moraine is an Aes Sedai, after all." "I keep being reminded of that," he said. "Burn me, I wish I could forget." "I did not hear you complaining when she stopped the Trollocs from catching us," Egwene said tartly. "I just wish we could do without her." He shrugged uncomfortably under her steady gaze. "I suppose we can't, though. I've been thinking. Her eyebrows rose, but he was used to surprise whenever he claimed an idea. Even when his ideas were as good as theirs, they always remembered how deliberate he was in thinking of them. We can wait for Lan and Moraine to find us. Of course she can. Moraine Sedai said she would find us if we were separated. He let her finish, then went on. Or the Trollocs could find us first. Moraine
Round
could
two
be
done.
dead too. All of them could be. No, Egwene. I'm sorry, but they could be. I hope they are all safe. I hope they'll walk up to this fire any minute. But hope is like a piece of string when you're drowning. It just isn't enough to get you out by itself. Egwene closed her mouth and stared at him with her jaw set. Finally, she said, "You want to go downriver to Whitebridge? If Moraine Sedai doesn't find us here, that's where she will look next." "I suppose," he said slowly, "that Whitebridge is where we should go. But the Fades probably know that too. That's where they'll be looking. And this time we don't have an Aes Sedai or a warder to protect us. I suppose you're going to suggest running off somewhere, the way Matt wanted to? Hiding somewhere the Fades and Trollocs won't find us? Or Moraine Sedai either?" "Don't think I haven't considered it," he said quietly. "But every time we think we are free, Fades and Trollocs find us again. I don't know if there is any place we could hide from them. I don't like it much. But we need
Oh, round
Moraine."
2 is already done.
"I don't understand then, Parent. Where do we go?" He blinked in surprise. She was waiting for his answer, waiting for him to tell her what to do. It had never occurred to him that she would look to him to take the lead. Egwene never liked doing what someone else had planned out, and she never let anybody tell her what to do, except maybe the wisdom, and he thought sometimes she balked at that. He smoothed the dirt in front of him with his hand and cleared his throat roughly. "If this is where we are now, that is Whitebridge." He stabbed the ground twice with his finger. "Then Camelin should be somewhere around here." He made a third mark, off to the side. He paused, looking at the 3 dots in the dirt. His entire plan was based on what he remembered of her father's old map. Master Alvear said it was not too accurate, and anyway, he had never mooned over it as much as Rand and Matt. But Egwene said nothing. When he looked up, she was still watching him with her hands in her lap. "Camelin?" She sounded stunned. "Camelin." He drew a line in the dirt between 2 of the dots. Away from the river and straight across.
The one I had made
Nobody
is supposed to be like a
would expect that.
chainmail one.
"We'll wait for them in Camelin." He dusted his hands and waited. He thought it was a good plan, but surely she would have objections now. He expected she would take charge. She was always bullying him into something, and that was all right with him. To his surprise, she nodded. "There must be villages. We can ask directions." "What worries me," Perrin said, "is what we do if the Aes Sedai doesn't find us there." Light. Who'd ever have thought I'd worry about something like that? What if she doesn't come to Camelin? Maybe she thinks we're dead. Maybe she'll take Rand and Matt straight to Tarvalin. "Moraine Sedai said she could find us," Egwene said firmly. "If she can find us here, she can find us in Camelin. And she will." Perrin nodded slowly. "If you say so. But if she doesn't appear in Camelin in a few days,
Well, it's pretty
we go
much
on to
just
Tarvalin and put our case before the Amaryllis
like
Seat."
chainmail.
He took a deep breath. 2 weeks ago, you'd never even seen an Aes Sedai. Now you're talking about the Amaryllis Seat. Light. "According to Lan, there's a good road from Camelin." He looked at the oiled paper packet beside Egwene and cleared his throat. "What chance of a little more bread and cheese?" "This might have to last a long time," she said. "Unless you have better luck with snares than I did last night. At least the fire was easy." She laughed softly as if she had made a joke, tucking the packet back into her saddlebags. Apparently there were limits to how much leadership she was willing to accept. His stomach rumbled. "In that case," he said, standing, "you might as well start now." "But you're still wet," she protested. I'll walk myself dry, he said firmly, and began kicking dirt over the fire. If he was the leader, it was time to start leading. The wind from the river was picking up. Chapter 23. Wolf Brother. From the start, Perrin knew the journey to Caitlin was going to be far from comfortable, beginning with Egwene's insistence that they take turns riding Bella. They did not know how far it was, she said, but it was too far for her to be the only one who rode. Her jaw firmed and her eyes stared at him unblinking. I'm too big to ride Bella, he said. I'm used to walking and I'd rather. And I'm not used to walking? Egwene said sharply. That isn't what I'm the only one who's supposed to get saddle sore, is that it? And when you walk till your feet are ready to fall off, you'll expect me to look after
They
you.
burned
He
quicker today
breathed when she looked
because
like going on.
there's actually
You'll take the first turn.
smoke instead of
Her face turned even more
roach
stubborn,
weed.
but he refused to let her get a word in edgewise. If you won't get in the saddle by yourself, I'll put you there. She gave him a startled look, and a small smile curved her lips. In that case. She sounded as if she were about to laugh, but she climbed up. He grumbled to himself as he turned away from the river. Leaders in stories never had to put up with this sort of thing. Egwene did insist on him taking his turns, and whenever he tried to avoid it, she bullied him into the saddle. Blacksmithing did not lend itself to a slender build, and Bella was not very large as horses went. Every time he put his foot in the stirrup, the shaggy mare looked at him with what he was sure was reproach. Small things, perhaps, but they irritated. Soon he flinched whenever Egwene announced, It's your turn, Perrin. In stories, leaders seldom flinched, and they were never bullied. But, he reflected, they never had to deal with Egwene either. There were only short rations of bread and cheese to begin with, and what there was gave out by the end of the first day. Perrin set snares along likely rabbit runs. They looked old, but it was worth a chance, while Egwene began laying a fire. When he was done, he decided to try his hand with his sling before the light failed altogether. They had not seen a sign of anything at all alive, but, to his surprise, he jumped a scrawny rabbit almost at once. He was so surprised when it burst from under a bush right beneath his feet that it almost got away. But he fetched it at 40 paces, just as it was darting around a tree. When he came back to the camp with the rabbit, Egwene had broken limbs all laid for the fire, but she was kneeling beside the pile with her eyes closed. What are you doing? You can't wish a fire. Egwene gave a jump at his first words and twisted around to stare at him with a hand to her throat. You startled me. I was lucky, he said, holding up the rabbit. Get your flint and steel. We eat well tonight, at least. I don't have a flint, she said slowly. It was in my pocket, and I lost it in the river. Then how? It was so easy back there on the riverbank, Perrin. Just the way Moraine said I showed me. I just reached out and... She gestured as if grasping for something, then let her hand fall with a sigh. I can't find it now. Perrin licked his lips uneasily. The power? She nodded, and he stared at her. Are you crazy? I mean, the one power? You can't just play around with something like that. It was so easy, Perrin. I can do it. I can channel the power. He took a deep breath. I'll make a fire, Egwene. Promise you won't try this thing again. I will not. Her jaw firmed in a way that made him sigh. Would you give up that axe of yours, Perrin Barra? Would you walk around with one hand tied behind your back? I won't do it. I'll make the fire, Bo, he said wearily. At least don't try it again tonight. Please? She acquiesced grudgingly, and even after the rabbit was roasting on a spit over the flames, he had the feeling she felt she could have done it better. She would not give up trying either, every night, though the best she ever did was a trickle of smoke that vanished almost immediately. Her eyes dared him to say a word, and he wisely kept his mouth shut. After that one hot meal, they subsisted on coarse, wild tubers and a few young shoots. With still no sign of spring, none of it was plentiful, and none of it was tasty either. Neither complained, but not a meal passed without one or the other sighing regretfully, and they both knew it was for the tang of a bit of cheese, or even the smell of bread. A find of mushrooms, Queen's crowns, the best, one afternoon in a shady part of the forest was enough to seem a great treat. They gobbled them down, laughing and telling stories from back in Emmons Field. Stories that began, "Do you remember when?" But the mushrooms did not last long, and neither did the laughter. There was little mirth and hunger. Whichever was walking carried a sling ready to let fly at the sight of a rabbit or squirrel, but the only time either hurled a stone was in frustration. The snares they set so carefully each evening yielded nothing at dawn, and they did not dare stay a day in one place to leave the snares out. Neither of them knew how far it was to Camelin, and neither would feel safe until they got there, if then. Perrin began to wonder if his stomach could shrink enough to make a hole all the way through his middle. They made good time, as he saw it, but as they got farther and farther from the Arenelle without seeing a village or even a farmhouse where they could ask directions, his doubts about his own plan grew. Egwene continued to appear outwardly as confident as when they set out, but he was sure that sooner or later she would say it would have been better to risk the Trollocs than to wander around lost for the rest of their lives. She never did, but he kept expecting it. 2 days from the river, the land changed to thickly forested hills, as gripped by the tail end of winter as everywhere else, and a day after that the hills flattened out again, the dense forest broken by glades, often a mile or more across. Snow still lay in hidden hollows, for the air was brisk of a morning, and the wind cold always. Nowhere did they see a road, or a plowed field, or chimney smoke in the distance, or any other sign of human habitation. At least, none where men still dwelt. Once the remains of tall stone ramparts encircled a hilltop. Parts of roofless stone houses stood inside the fallen circle. The forest had long swallowed it. Trees grew right through everything, and spider webs of old creeper enveloped the big stone blocks. Another time they came on a stone tower, broken topped and brown with old moss, leaning on the huge oak whose thick roots were slowly toppling it. But they found no place where men had breathed in living remembrance. Memories of Shadar Logoth kept them away from the ruins and hurried their footsteps until they were once more deep in places that seemed never to have known a human footstep. Dreams plagued Perrin's sleep, fearful dreams. Baal-Zaman was in them, chasing him through mazes, hunting him, but Perrin never met him face to face, so far as he remembered. And the journey had been enough to bring a few bad dreams. Egwene complained of nightmares about Shadar Logoth, especially the 2 nights after they found the ruined fort and the abandoned tower. Perrin kept his own counsel, even when he woke sweating and shaking in the dark. She was looking to him to lead them safely to Camelin, not share worries about which they could do nothing. He was walking at Bella's head, wondering if they would find anything to eat this evening, when he first caught the smell. The mare flared her nostrils and swung her head in the next moment. He seized her bridle before she could whicker. "That's smoke," Egwene said excitedly. She leaned forward in the saddle, drew a deep breath. "A cook fire! Somebody is roasting dinner. Rabbit!" "Maybe," Perrin said cautiously, and her eager smile faded. He exchanged his sling for the wicked half-moon of the axe. His hands opened and closed uncertainly on the thick haft. It was a weapon, but neither his hidden practice behind the forge nor Lan's teaching had really prepared him to use it as one. Even the battle before Shadar Logoth was too vague in his mind to give him any confidence. He could never quite manage that void that Rand and the Warder talked about either. Sunlight slanted through the trees behind them, and the forest was a still mass of dappled shadows. The faint smell of wood smoke drifted around them, tinged with the aroma of cooking meat. Could be rabbit, he thought, and his stomach grumbled. And it could be something else, he reminded himself. He looked at Egwene. She was watching him. There were responsibilities to being leader. Wait here, he said softly. She frowned, but he cut her off as she opened her mouth. And be quiet. We don't know who it is yet. She nodded. Reluctantly, but she did it. Baron wondered why that did not work when he was trying to make her take his turn riding. Drawing a deep breath, he started for the source of the smoke. He had not spent as much time in the forests around Emmons Field as Rand or Matt, but still he had done his share of hunting rabbits. He crept from tree to tree without so much as snapping a twig. It was not long before he was peering around the bole of a tall oak with spreading serpentine limbs that bent to touch the ground, then rose again. Beyond lay a campfire, and a lean, sun-browned man was leaning against one of the limbs not far from the flames. At least he was not a Trolloc, but he was the strangest fellow Perrin had ever seen. For one thing, his clothes all seemed to be made from animal skins, with the fur still on. Even his boots and the odd, flat-topped round cap on his head. His cloak was a crazy quilt of rabbit and squirrel. His trousers appeared to be made from the long-haired hide of a brown and white goat. Gathered at the back of his neck with a cord, his brown hair hung to his waist. A thick beard fanned across half his chest. A long knife hung at his belt, almost a sword, and a bow and quiver stood propped against a limb close to hand. The man leaned back with his eyes closed, apparently asleep, but Perrin did not stir from his concealment. 6 sticks slanted over the fellow's fire, and on each stick a rabbit was skewered, roasted brown, and now and then dripping juice that hissed in the flames. The smell of them, so close, made his mouth water.
One of us said how much milligrams it is.
The man opened one eye and cocked it at Perrin's hiding place. You and your friend might as well sit and have a bite.
Oh, it's not that strong.
I haven't seen you eat much the last couple of days.
It's only 100 milligrams.
You've been watching me for 2 days? The man chuckled deep in his throat. Yes, I've been watching you. And that pretty girl pushes you around like a bantam rooster, doesn't she? Heard you mostly. The horse is the only one of you doesn't trample around loud enough to be heard 5 miles off. You going to ask her in? Or are you intending to eat all the rabbit yourself? Perrin bristled. He knew he did not make much noise. You could not get close enough to a rabbit in the waterwood to fetch it with a sling if you made noise. But the smell of rabbit made him remember that Egwene was hungry too, not to mention waiting to discover if it was a Trolloc fire they had smelled. He slipped the haft of his axe through the belt loop and raised his voice. Egwene, it's all right. It is rabbit. Offering his hand, he added in a more normal tone. My name is Perrin. Perrin Ibarra. The man considered his hand before taking it awkwardly, as if unused to shaking hands. I'm called Elias, he said, looking up. Elias Machira. Perrin gasped and nearly dropped Elias's hand. The man's eyes were yellow, like bright, polished gold. Some memory tickled at the back of Perrin's mind, then fled. All he could think of right then was that all of the Trollocs' eyes he had seen had been almost black. Egwene appeared, cautiously leading Bella. She tied the mare's reins to one of the smaller branches of the yoke and made polite sounds when Perrin introduced her to Elias, but her eyes kept drifting to the rabbits. She did not seem to notice the man's eyes. When Elias motioned them to the food, she fell to with a will. Perrin hesitated only a minute longer before joining her. Elias waited silently while they ate. Perrin was so hungry he tore off pieces of meat so hot he had to juggle them from hand to hand before he could hold them in his mouth. Even Egwene showed little of her usual neatness. Greasy juice ran down her chin. Day faded into twilight before they began to slow down. Moonless darkness closing in around the fire, and then Elias spoke. What are you doing out here? There isn't a house inside 50 miles in any direction. We're going to Kingman, Egwene said. Perhaps you could... Her eyes lifted coolly as Elias threw back his head and roared with laughter. Perrin stared at him, a rabbit leg half raised to his mouth. Kim! Elias wheezed when he could talk again. The path you were following, the line you've taken the last 2 days, you'll pass 100 miles or more north of Camelon. We were going to ask directions, Egwene said defensively. We just haven't found any villages or farms yet. And none you will, Elias said, chuckling. The way you're going, you can travel all the way to the spine of the world without seeing another human. Of course, if you manage to climb the spine, it can be done, some places. You could find people in the Aiel Waste, but you wouldn't like it there. You'd broil by day and freeze by night and die of thirst any time. It takes an Aielman to find water in the waste. And they don't like strangers much. No, not much, I'd say. He set off into another, more furious burst of laughter, this time actually rolling on the ground. Not much at all, he managed. Perrin shifted uneasily. I'll be eating with a madman. Egwene frowned, but she waited until Elias's mirth faded a little, then said, Perhaps you could show us the way. You seem to know a good deal more about where places are than we do. Elias stopped laughing. Raising his head, he replaced his round fur cap, which had fallen off while he was rolling about, and stared at her from under lowered brows. I don't much like people, he said in a flat voice. Cities are full of people. I don't go near villages or even farms very often. Villagers, farmers, they don't like my friends. I wouldn't even have helped you if you hadn't been stumbling around as helpless and innocent as newborn cubs. But at least you can tell us which way to go, she insisted. If you direct us to the nearest village, even if it's 50 miles away, surely they'll give us directions to Camelon. Be still, Elias said. My friends are coming. Bella suddenly whinnied in fear and began jerking to pull her reins free. Perrin half rose as shapes appeared all around them in the darkening forest. Bella reared and twisted, screaming. Quiet the mare, Elias said. They won't hurt her. Or you, if you're still. 4 wolves stepped into the firelight, shaggy, waist-high forms, with jaws that could break a man's leg. As if the people were not there, they walked up to the fire and lay down between the humans. In the darkness among the trees, firelight reflected off the eyes of more wolves, on all sides. Yellow eyes, Perrin thought, like Elias's. That was what he had been trying to do.
I might save the last little bit for tomorrow
Carefully
night.
watching the wolves among them.
Because half of that actually
I would not
pretty
do
good.
that, Elias said. If they think you mean harm, they'll stop being friendly. They were staring at him, those 4 wolves.
Only 1 second. I'm going to go throw it back in the fridge.
He had the feeling that all the wolves, those in the trees as well,
About
were
half
staring
of it.
at him. It made his
Save
skin
the other half for
itch.
tomorrow night.
Cautiously, he moved his hands away from the axe.
Whoa.
He imagined he could feel the tension ease among the wolves. Slowly, he sat back down. His hands shook until he gripped his knees to stop them. Egwene was so stiff she almost quivered. One wolf, close to black with a lighter gray patch on his face, lay nearly touching her. Bella had ceased her screaming and rearing. Instead, she stood trembling and shifting in an attempt to keep all of the wolves in view, kicking occasionally to show the wolves that she could, intending to sell her life dearly. The wolves seemed to ignore her and everyone else. Tongues lolling out of their mouths, they waited at their ease. There, Elias said. That's better. Are they tame? Egwene asked faintly, and hopefully too. They're pets? Elias snorted. Wolves don't tame, girl. Not even as well as men. They're my friends. We keep each other company. Hunt together, converse, after a fashion. Just like any friends. Isn't that right, Dapple? A wolf with fur that faded through a dozen shades of gray, dark and light, turned her head to look at him. Talk to them? Aaron marveled. It isn't exactly talking, Elias replied slowly. The words don't matter, and they aren't exactly right either. Her name isn't Dapple. It's something that means the way shadows play on a forest pool at a midwinter dawn, with the breeze rippling the surface, and the tang of ice when the water touches the tongue, and a hint of snow before nightfall in the air. But that isn't quite it either. You can't say it in words. It's more of a feeling. That's the way wolves talk. The others are Vern, Hopper, Wind. Vern had an old scar on his shoulder that might explain his name, but there was nothing about the other two wolves to give any indication of what their names might mean. For all the man's gruffness, Aaron thought Elias was pleased to have the chance to talk to another human. He seemed eager enough to do it, at least. Aaron eyed the wolf's teeth glistening in the firelight and thought it might be a good idea to keep him talking. How did you learn to talk to wolves, Elias? They found out, Elias replied. I didn't. Not at first. That's always the way that I understand. The wolves find you, not you them. Some people thought me touched by the Dark One, because wolves started appearing wherever I went. I suppose I thought so too, sometimes. Most decent folk began to avoid me. And the ones who sought me out were the kind I wanted to know one way or another. Then I noticed there were times when the wolves seemed to know what I was thinking, to respond to what was in my head. That was the real beginning. They were curious about me. Wolves can sense people usually, but not like this. They were glad to find me. They say it's been a long time since they hunted with men. And when they say a long time, the feeling I get is like a cold wind howling all the way down from the first day. I never heard of men hunting with wolves, Gwen said. Her voice was not entirely steady, but the fact that the wolves were just lying there seemed to give her heart. If Elias heard her, he gave no sign. Wolves remember things differently from the way people do, he said. His strange eyes took on a faraway look, as if he were drifting off on the flow of memory himself. Every wolf remembers the history of all wolves, or at least the shape of it. Like I said, it can't be put into words very well. They remember running down prey side by side with men. But it was so long ago that it's more like the shadow of a shadow than a memory. That's very interesting, Gwen said, and Elias looked at her sharply. No, I mean it. It is. She wet her lips. Could you teach us to talk to them? Elias snorted again. It can't be taught. Some can do it, some can't. They say he can. He pointed at Baron. Baron looked at Elias's finger as if it were a knife. He really is a madman. The wolves were staring at him again. He shifted uncomfortably. You say you're going to Camelin, Elias said. But that still doesn't explain what you're doing out here, days from anywhere. He tossed back his fur-patched cloak and lay down on his side, propped on one elbow and waiting expectantly. Baron glanced at Egwene. Early on, they concocted a story for when they found people to explain where they were going without bringing them any trouble, without letting anyone know where they were really from or where they were really going, eventually. Who knew what careless word might reach a Fade's ear? They had worked on it every day, patching it together, honing out flaws. And they had decided Egwene was the one to tell it. She was better with words than he was, and she claimed she could always tell when he was lying by his face. Egwene began at once, smoothly. They were from the north, from Saldaea, from farms outside a tiny village. Neither of them had been more than 20 miles from home in their whole lives.
Hey, John McDonald, how you doing?
But they had heard gleemen's stories and merchants' tales, and they wanted to see some of the world. Camelin and Ilion.
Hope you're doing
the Sea
well,
of
bro.
Storms, and maybe even the fabled islands of the sea folk. Aaron listened with satisfaction. Not even Tom Maryland could have made a better tale from the little they knew of the world outside the two rivers, or one better suited to their needs. From Soldaia, eh?
It's already
Elias said
after
when she was
1.
done. Aaron nodded. That's right. He thought about seeing Moradon first. I'd surely like to see the king. But the capital city would be the first place our fathers would look. That was his part of it. To make it plain they had never been to Moradon. That way no one would expect them to know anything about the city, just in case they ran into someone who really had been there. It was all a long way from Emmons Field and the events of Winter Night. Nobody hearing the tale would have any reason to think of Tar Valon or Aes Sedai. Quite a story, Elias nodded. Yes, quite a story. There's a few things wrong with it, but the main thing is, Dapple says it's all a lump of lies. Every last word. Lies! Egwene exclaimed. Why would we lie? The four wolves had not moved, but they no longer seemed to be just lying there around the fire. They crouched instead, and their yellow eyes watched the Emmons Fielders without blinking. Aaron did not say anything, but his hand strayed to the axe at his waist. The four wolves rose to their feet in one quick movement, and his hand froze. They made no
Hell
sound,
yeah,
but
John
the thick hackles
McDonald.
on their necks stood erect. One of the wolves, back under the trees, raised a growling howl into the night. Others answered. 5, 10, 20, till the darkness rippled with them. Abruptly, they too were still. Cold sweat trickled down Perrin's face. If you think... Egwene stopped to swallow. Despite the chill in the air, there was sweat on her face too. If you think we're lying, then you'll probably prefer that we make our own camp for the night away from yours. Ordinarily I would, girl. But right now, I want to know about the Trollocs and the Half-Men. Perrin struggled to keep his face impassive and hoped he was doing better at it than Egwene. Elias went on in a conversation. Dapple says she smelled Halfmen and Trollocs in your minds while you were telling that fool story. They all did. You're mixed up with Trollocs somehow, and the Eyeless. Wolves...
Alright, everyone. I'm gonna call into this live for tonight. That juice actually works a little bit. I'm actually a little tired. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who keeps stopping by. I appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe.